Part 11. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 101. Ye Yu quickly walked into the mansion where Ye Lingxian lived. When passing by the yard, he happened to see the girl sitting in the house through the window. Ye Lingxian was sitting in front of the window sill with her cheek in hand, looking at the night outside the window, looking like she was in a daze. She sat quietly, and her delicate and flawless face seemed to be tinged with a silvery glow under the moonlight, which was extremely beautiful. Looking at Ye Lingxian's almost perfect face, Ye Yu was stunned for a moment. The more beautiful Ye Lingxian was, the more he regretted that he had ignored such a beautiful girl beside him in the past, and instead was fascinated by Biruoxi. Biruoxi had clearly rejected him so coldly at the beginning, but he became more and more obsessed, recalling the past experience. At this moment, Ye Yu's hatred for Musian became even deeper. If it weren't for Musian, Biruoxi would never have written a letter of divorce. After all, Biruoxi is a girl who obeys her parents very much. If it weren't for Musian's temptation, how could she do that? But fortunately it's not too late. Musian recently chose Biruoxi in public. With Lingxian's noble and elegant character, she would not be seduced by Musian like Qian'er. It would be better to say that if Ye Lingxian waited and saw Musian running to comfort Ye Qian late at night, she would probably give up on Musian completely. Brother Ye Yu, it's so late, what can you do? Seemingly aware of Ye Yu's presence, Ye Lingxian turned her head slightly, looked at the young man standing in the yard, and asked in a calm tone. The way he looked at him was as if he were looking at an outsider. Lingxian hasn't rested so late. Ye Yu showed the concern of an elder brother and looked at Ye Lingxian with concern. However, Ye Lingxian always looked at him coldly and asked softly again, "What's the matter with brother Ye Yu?" Such a look made Ye Yu's expression freeze. When she saw him in the past, Ye Lingxian would at least show a sweet smile, but now. And all of this was caused by Musian. If it weren't for Musian's temptation, how could Ye Lingxian have such a bad impression of herself? Ye Yu suppressed the anger in his heart, looked up at Ye Lingxian, and went straight to the point. Just now Musian went to find Qian'er. I wanted to stop him, but I failed in the end. As he spoke, he secretly observed Ye Lingxian's face, trying to see a hint of anger or even loss on her face. However, what disappointed him was that there was still no change in the expression on Ye Lingxian's pretty face. She just said softly after being silent for a while. "Well, that's it?" He responded calmly, as if he didn't care at all about the matter. This also made Ye Yu feel a little disappointed. "Is he in Qian'er's room now?" Ye Lingxian asked suddenly. Ye Yu seemed to have hope again in his heart, and immediately said, "I just heard the sound of them being intimate in the room. That Musian is using sweet words to seduce Qian'er." When he said this, Ye Yu's tone was full of indignation. Ye Lingxian nodded slightly, smiled slightly, and said, "I understand, it's getting late. Brother Ye Yu, please go back and rest." Ye Yu was stunned, looking up at Ye Lingxian as if in disbelief, and said, "Lingxian, won't you come with me to stop Musian?" Ye Lingxian turned her head slightly and looked at Ye Yu, her eyebrows curved into crescent moons, and she smiled. "Falling is free. Even if I am Qian'er's sister, it's not easy for me to interfere in such things, right?" Ye Lingxian paused and said softly, "Besides, I had already guessed that he would go to Qian'er. Rather, if she knew that Musian did not go to Ye Qian, she would only be more disappointed with him." Although now knowing that Musian was in Ye Qian's room, Ye Lingxian was also disappointed. Girls are such tangled creatures. On the one hand, Ye Lingxian hoped that Musian could comfort her sister, but subconsciously she didn't want him to go. After all, she will be disappointed in Musian whether he goes or not. Brother Ye Yu doesn't need to interfere in their affairs. We are not qualified to interfere with their romance, right? Ye Lingxian said calmly again. The underlying meaning of the statement is probably, Don't worry about this matter, it has nothing to do with you. Yayu was unconvinced and said, after all, I am also Jian'er's cousin. I know that she is going to fall into Musian's clutches, how can I just sit idly by and do nothing? Ya Lingxian tilted her head slightly and asked in confusion, in that case, why did you leave Musian who was intimate with Jian'er in the room and come to me instead? Yayu opened his mouth slightly, and finally had to say, I'll take another look at Jian'er. If Musian is still there, I will definitely stop him. After saying that, he turned and left the yard. Behind him, Ya Lingxian, who was wearing a lavender double-breasted skirt and had an elegant and charming temperament, looked at her brother who had grown up together in the clan with indifference in her eyes. Ya Lingxian is not a fool, on the contrary, she is a very smart girl. She knew very well why Yayu came to her tonight. If he really wanted to stop Musian, why would Yayu go out of his way to find her? I don't know if it's because too many things happened today that made her physically and mentally exhausted or what. As a cultivator in the Qi training realm, Ya Lingxian was a little tired, so she couldn't help but yawn lightly and felt a wave of sleepiness coming. Ya Lingxian stood up and stretched her beautiful figure, slightly raised her head and looked at the night outside the window. She couldn't sleep yet, because she wanted to know if Musian would lie to her again. Old Wei, did Brother Mu go to see Jian'er tonight? Ya Lingxian suddenly asked. Under the shadow of the yard, an old man quietly appeared in the field of vision and said respectfully, the eldest young master of the Mu family did go to see Miss Jian'er tonight. Seeing Ya Lingxian silent, Old Wei hesitated and said, Miss, don't you plan to go and see? No need. Ya Lingxian turned her head to look at the old man, her face indifferent, and smiled, I'm waiting for someone to come and explain this to me. At the same time, after Yayu left on the other side, he did not go to Yeqian's residence, but went directly back to his own room. It's enough to do this tonight. Now he doesn't need to do anything extra, just sit and practice peacefully. Lingxian is a very smart girl. At this point, even if she doesn't go to Jian'er to confirm the truth, as long as she asks someone, she can know whether Musian went to see Yeqian tonight. Although he lost a cousin, he got the possibility to pursue Lingxian. From this point of view, it's not a loss at all. In the final analysis, cousins can only be used to love, but Lingxian can be used to pursue. Thinking of the beautiful and refined girl whose face is no less than Biruoxi, Yayu's heart suddenly became hot. Now thinking about it, I feel that I was so stupid in the past. Biruoxi is beautiful, but Ya Lingxian is not inferior to her. Why did I pursue Biruoxi blindly in the past? No, not only Ya Lingxian, but also the witch of Chenexai Chamber of Commerce, and even senior sister Lan are all beautiful women. Musian pursued a tree, but he can pursue a forest. With his talent and even his status as an alchemist, it is not impossible for him to stand out in Lianji sect. Musian thought he had won, but in fact, he had already lost miserably tonight. Yayu calmed himself down. He sat cross-legged at the head of the bed, absorbing the mixed spiritual energy around him into his body, and began to struggle hard to improve his realm. Some people are working hard to cultivate, and naturally some people are taking advantage of the situation. No, this is not taking advantage of the situation. According to Musian, this is called alternative cultivation. He is a natural furnace. Although the spiritual energy in the other furnace cannot be extracted into his body, it can contribute to the realm of other girls. As a good person who likes to help others, Musian has always liked to help others. In the house, candlelight lit up the room. Musian looked at Yeqian, whose face was shy and eyes were dodging under the candlelight, and asked softly, Jian'er, are you finally willing to forgive me? Yeqian sat upright on the chair, lowered her head and looked at her toes, but could only see two mature and soft breasts. She seemed a little nervous and uneasy, and felt that the boy was playing with one of her hands. She was even more shy in her heart and said softly, I said, I have nothing to do with Brother Mu. Muzian gently pinched Yechien's palm, raised his hand and gently stroked her delicate and smooth face, staring at the pure and charming face that was now faintly flushed, and said, "Why are you still saying this, Chiener? Have you forgotten what I said to you just now?" Yechien was stunned, recalling Muzian's sweet words just now, and the affectionate look when he stared at her at that time. She was a little moved in her heart, and the slight annoyance in Muzian's heart completely disappeared. But when she thought of how he had bullied her so recklessly not long ago, she hummed softly and cursed softly, "You only know how to make girls happy. Huh, it seems that there is no problem." Looking at this scene, Muzian finally breathed a sigh of relief. In this way, Yechien's problem was temporarily solved. Yechien was a very simple girl, and it was not difficult to make her happy. But you have to find the right way. If he was as stupid as Yayu, Yechien might not even see him. Of course, it was also because of Yayu that Yechien's forgiveness was obtained so quickly. If I have to say, this time it is really thanks to him. Chiener, if there is nothing else, then I will go back, Muzian asked. Yechien said softly, and then wiped off the remaining traces of rouge at the corner of her mouth with her fingers, and glanced at Muzian with some resentment. "It's so annoying. I have to put on rouge again." The tone was full of resentment, but the eyebrows were tender. "But I was planning to rest anyway, so it doesn't matter." Muzian closed the door and left. When he passed the yard, he looked around and confirmed that there was no one around. He immediately turned around and went back to Yelingsuan's house. Although he had been there once today, he had to go again to be on the safe side. As for the reason. First, Yelingsuan's intelligence network was very large, and he could vaguely feel that Yelingxian valued his sister, and even felt guilty about Yechien. Secondly, if he is Yayu and wants to secretly sow discord, the best option is to go to Yelingxian or Bairuoxi tonight to tell them about it. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 102. After comforting Yechien to sleep, Muzian left the room and walked along the familiar path in the yard to another mansion, where he saw Yelingxian sitting in front of the window-sill in a daze. As if she had noticed Muzian's presence, Yelingxian turned her head and looked over, confused. "It's so late, Mr. Mu, do you have anything else to do?" "I do have something to tell you, and I want to chat with you." "Is it convenient for Sister Lingxian to open the door now?" Muzian looked up and smiled. Yelingxian shook her head slightly and said, "You'd better tell me directly. I'm ready to rest." She always felt that if Muzian came in now, it would not be just a simple chat. "I went to find Sister Chiener tonight." Muzian stared at Yelingsuan's face and spoke slowly. There was no surprise on her face. It seemed that she knew about this. After Muzian finished speaking, he saw Yelingsuan's expression without any fluctuations, and his heart was slightly clear. "Mr. Mu went to find Chiener. Why did you come to tell me specifically?" Yelingxian finally put down her hand that was supporting her cheek and stared into Muzian's eyes. Although this girl may be a novice in terms of feelings, she has a certain amount of wisdom in other aspects. If she experiences more things in the future and grows up, she will surely become very scary. Well, scary in all senses. Muzian stared at Yelingsuan's lively eyes calmly and said sincerely, "I want to face you openly, but I hope I will have no guilt in the future." "Mr. Mu went to find Chiener late at night, and then ran to tell me about this. Is this what you call having no guilt?" Yelingxian smiled lightly. "Chiener is a good girl, and she is very vulnerable. I'm afraid she will be unable to think about it alone and get stuck in a dead end," Muzian said helplessly. Yelingxian was silent. "That's right. She can be said to have grown up with Yechien, and she naturally knows the character of that sister very well. If Yechien was left alone in the room with her thoughts, her innocent sister might really be upset, so she hoped that Muzian could go to Yechien to comfort her. However, when Yelingxian heard that he had gone to Yechien, She felt uncomfortable. Musian glanced at the blue and white porcelain vase beside the table and the snow lotus in the vase, and felt relieved. He said, "Today's sect assessment consumed too much spiritual energy. Sister Lingxian should be tired, so I won't bother you." Ya Lingxuan's eyes moved slightly, and she couldn't help but look at Musian up and down. Speaking of which, today's sect assessment of his control of the formation did consume a lot of spiritual energy. Ya Lingxian hesitated for a moment, raised her right hand, took out a bottle of pills from the ring, and handed it to Musian from the window. "What is this?" Musian looked up at her, and his handsome face, which was already a little pale, seemed to have a bit more weakness under the moonlight. When Ya Lingxian thought that Musian became like this in order to help her and Ye Qian pass the test, the slight displeasure in her heart disappeared, and her eyebrows softened a lot, saying, "There are probably 3 soul replenishing pills in here. Master Mu, take the next one tonight, and your spiritual energy should be fully restored in the second half of the night. The soul replenishing pill, if I remember correctly, it should be a 5th grade pill. Most auction houses sell it for more than 20,000 or 30,000 spirit stones, and there is still no demand. This is indeed a little rich woman." Musian looked up at Ya Lingxuan's delicate face, and couldn't help but grab Ya Lingxuan's hands with both hands, and whispered, "Sister Lingxian, you are so kind." Ya Lingxuan's eyes flashed slightly, and she said reservedly, "Mr. Mu, please respect yourself." "Are you still angry with me?" Musian sighed softly. "In fact, compared to the spirit-boosting pill, if Sister Lingxian can change her name, it will be more helpful to my spirit." Feeling the warmth of Musian's palm coming from her little hand, and being stared at by Musian like this, even a girl as quiet and elegant as Ya Lingxian was a little flustered. After putting the pill into his hand, she gently pulled her hand out of his palm. Then she turned her face away, only giving Musian a perfect side profile, and whispered, "Mr. Mu, it's getting late, please go back." Musian stared at Ya Lingxian for a long time, and sighed, "Then I won't bother you for now, Lingxian." After that, he turned and left. Ya Lingxian looked at Musian's back as he left. The moonlight shone down from the sky, and his tall figure seemed a little lonely in the quiet courtyard. Ya Lingxian opened her mouth slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but she slowly closed it in the end. "Brother Mu." When Musian was about to leave, a voice as thin as a mosquito's hum came from the room. Then, Ya Lingxian quickly closed the window, as if she didn't want Musian to see her expression at the moment. Musian paused, but didn't look back. He left happily with the spirit-boosting pill. In the dim night, Musian knocked on Bairuoxi's room and saw Bairuoxi meditating in front of the bed. It seemed that because it was night, Miss Bai was wearing a loose white lingerie, which outlined an excellent body proportion, and her temperament was as bright and cold as frost and snow. In front of Bairuoxi, a light ball emitting a pale white glow was slowly rotating. Its light was quite soft, transforming the mixed spiritual energy in the room into spiritual energy that could be directly absorbed into the body. Musian slowly walked to the head of the bed and sat down beside her. As soon as she approached, Bairuoxi seemed to have noticed something, her curled eyelashes trembled slightly, and she slowly opened her eyes. She turned her head to look at her side, and didn't seem very surprised, and said, "Mu Lang, where did you go at night?" "I went out to learn about some things in the section. I think it will be of great help to us in the future," Musian said, and turned his head to look at the beauty beside him. She obviously put on some makeup tonight, her lips were delicate, and under the candlelight, her pretty face, which was originally a little cold, became more charming because of those little makeup. "What do you know?" Bairuoxi asked curiously. Musian took off his robe and put it on her, and took the opportunity to embrace the beauty in his arms, saying, "It's not an important matter, don't worry about it." Feeling the warmth of his chest, Bairuoxi's original intention to continue asking suddenly disappeared, raised her head and looked at him infatuatedly, Her eyes were blurred, and her face was flushed like drunkenness. Muzian was not surprised by Bairuoxi's reaction. Although Miss Bai usually looks unattainable and cold, you will know that she is actually a weak beauty with no sense of security after spending time with her. It is difficult for her to resist a bold and intimate hug like Muzian, let alone resist. You chose me today, senior sister Lan, and the others should be very angry. Is it okay? Bairuoxi's dreamy voice came to her ears, and her almond eyes were full of worry. Muzian looked down at her cold face. A beauty like Bairuoxi usually makes people feel cold and weak. Coupled with her enchanting talent, ordinary people would only feel ashamed in front of her. But Muzian is different. Since he entered the room, he only had the mentality of why should we, as cultivators, fear strong enemies. He did not have any inferiority complex, but just wanted to suppress her so that she could show a charming look that was exactly the opposite of her usual reserve. Xuelian is most similar to you. I'm just telling the truth. Muzian hugged her waist, allowing her to lean completely on his arms. It's most similar to me, so why did Mu Lang give it to others? Bairuoxi asked curiously. Senior sister helped us a lot in Tianqian City in the past. Giving her precious elixir is inevitably a bribe, but Xuelian is different, Muzian said. What about Sister Lingxian? Sister Lingxian was too hostile to me at the beginning. We will all be disciples from the same sect in the future, so I hope to get along with them in harmony, Muzian explained. Bairuoxi buried her face in Muzian's arms, and pursed her lips inadvertently, as if she was unhappy. The weakness and shyness when she was nestled in Muzian's arms completely disappeared on her face. She took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. The expression on her face softened again, and she returned to her usual weak posture. She said softly, "You have offended senior sister this time. If you look for her in the future, she may not pay attention to you." Sister Lingxian seemed very angry at the time, and Sister Qianer seemed to be staring at me at the time. Everyone is so scary, Mu Lang. If you encounter difficulties in the future, come to me for discussion. We work together and can always find a way to solve the difficulties. Yes, everyone is so scary. Only Ruoxi knows how to feel sorry for Master Mu. In front of everyone, she directly declared her status as the queen, looking down on all the women. Muzian silently complained in his heart, lowered his head and stared at Bairuoxi's worried expression and the soft lips with rouge. As for Lan Murian, it is really not easy to deal with. Although it can be saved, it may take some time. While thinking, Muzian hugged Bairuoxi's slender waist and went to bed. Bairuoxi let out a small scream, and when she reacted, she was already lying on the bed. She looked at Muzian shyly, her eyes flickered shyly, and she turned her face away slightly, whispering, "Mu Lang, what are you going to do?" "Practice," Muzian said seriously. Bairuoxi was stunned and puzzled. "Why do you have to lie on the bed to meditate and practice?" Muzian covered Bairuoxi's mouth and whispered, "Don't talk, just feel this beautiful atmosphere." After that, he lowered his head and kissed her face, and finally moved slowly to occupy her lips. In the early morning, the sky gradually brightened. Muzian lay in the quilt tiredly and contentedly, feeling the soft body of the beauty in his arms, and was about to fall asleep. Aa. At this time, a beautiful voice like singing suddenly came to his ears, which also woke up Bairuoxi, who was about to rest, almost instantly, and slightly turned his head to look outside the door. That voice came from outside. "Is that a spirit dragon?" Bairuoxi said subconsciously. "It's okay, let's rest for a while." Muzian gently hugged Bairuoxi's slender waist, allowing her to get closer to him. Yayu slowly opened his eyes. Not only Muzian, but all the disciples in the sect heard the lonely and sad song of the spirit dragon in the early morning. Yayu naturally heard it too. "Teacher, what does the spirit dragon mean?" Yayu tried to ask the grandfather in his body. It is rumored that there is a spirit dragon in the Lianji sect that has existed since ancient times. It prefers people with great luck and will bring great luck to disciples with great luck. If you can get its favor, it will be of great help to your future practice, the old man slowly said. Spirit dragon, Yayu's heart was filled with a little more expectation. After he passed the sect assessment yesterday, he had been meditating and practicing in the house, so he didn't see the trace of Ling Long. However, Yayu also learned from other sect disciples that Ling Long appeared yesterday, and even learned that Ling Long seemed to have taken a fancy to Bai Ruoxi at that time, but in the end, for some reason, it went back. Obviously, Bai Ruoxi was not Ling Long's target. If I guessed correctly, Bai Ruoxi's great luck attracted Ling Long's attention. As for why Ling Long gave up on her in the end, it was probably because Bai Ruoxi could not be completely recognized by Ling Long. There were 3 people with great luck tested in Tianqian City this time, but the real person with great luck should be him. If Ling Long appeared today, it would be my chance to show off. The next day, Musian woke up early. Not to mention that it is okay to not rest after the refining spirit realm. Even cultivators in the refining Qi realm do not need to rest for a long time at night. Cultivators spend more time meditating, or taking a different approach, such as dual cultivation. Musian glanced at the beauty who seemed to be still sleeping, and quietly stood up to get out of bed. At this time, Bai Ruoxi stretched out a snow-white jade hand from the quilt, grabbed Musian's wrist, and pulled him to the head of the bed to sit down, and then leaned her white cheek on his chest, and said in a soft and pleasant voice, "Mu Lang, where are you going?" Ming Ming was still aloof at the beginning of last night, but now I don't know if she just woke up or what. Miss Bai showed a sticky attitude that made people feel excited, like a kitten trying to please her owner. This is probably the contrast cuteness. Musian silently felt the beautiful touch brought by Bai Ruoxi's soft body, gently stroked her hair, and said, "Wasn't Ling Long calling in the early morning this morning? I want to go out and see." He and Ling Long agreed to go find it 2 days later, but Ling Long was already calling AAA in the early morning this morning. I don't know if it was impatient to wait. It seems that I have to find a time to contact Ling Long in advance. In a few days, the selection ceremony for the inner disciples will be held. Malang, don't forget to meditate and practice, Bai Ruoxi reminded softly. Musian smiled and nodded, saying, "Don't worry, I have my own plan." After a pause, he continued, "For your place as an inner disciple, I will continue to help you in the evening." Musian has let it go. Since the natural furnace has no amplification effect on him, and dual cultivation is only effective for one other person, he might as well help the close people around him to improve their realm first. Of course, this kind of thing can't be rushed. Before practicing, there is another thing to deal with early. After Ling Long's shout this morning, I'm afraid more people will go to the edge of the cliff to try their luck. If this goes on, let alone 2 days, even in a few days, I'm afraid there will be no way to contact Ling Long without anyone noticing. I have to think of a way quickly. Musian hugged the beauty in his arms, feeling the greatness of human hearts, and fell into deep thought. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 103. After Musian left the room, he was about to go out along the path in the yard. At this time, he suddenly noticed Wei Mengru, who blocked her own breath not far away. The maid had obviously also noticed the call of the spirit dragon this morning. At this time, she was looking up in a certain direction, looking like she was thinking about something. "Sister Mengru, what are you daydreaming about?" Musian walked to Wei Mengru's side and took the initiative to greet her. Wei Mengru woke up from her sudden realization just now, glanced at Musian lightly, and said, "You have good energy." There was no lack of ridicule for Musian in these words. Even without thinking, it was known that Wei Mengru was talking about what happened between him and Bairuoxi last night. However, Musian had gradually become immune to the ridicule of the maid, and even enjoyed her eyes that were enough to excite the and smiled. In fact, my energy can be better. It's okay even if there is one more person. When he said this, he stared at Wei Mengru with burning eyes, trying to tease the maid. Wei Mengru sneered, if the sisters or senior sisters of the Ye family come to see you at night, I won't stop them. You'd better take care of yourself. If the sisters of the Ye family or Lan Murian suddenly visit one night, and Wei Mengru pretends not to know, then something big might happen. After all, for Bairuoxi's cultivation, Musian is working hard every day and is willing to help others. It would be embarrassing if he was caught on the spot. Who would come to see me in the middle of the night? Musian smiled, seemingly not caring. In fact, he silently remembered this possibility in his heart. This is Lianji sect, this mansion is not the Mu family, and there are not so many formations arranged. If someone comes in and Wei Mengru does not stop them. If they hear some exciting voices from Miss Bai outside the door. Just thinking of this possibility, Musian can't help but feel a little cold in his heart. It seems that he needs to find some time to learn the formation, at least he has to ensure that he can detect it immediately when outsiders enter the house where he lives now. It's really not easy to be a master of time management. Musian sighed secretly and changed the subject. That was the sound made by the spirit dragon just now, right? Sister Mengru, do you want to go out with me to take a look? Wei Mengru hesitated for a moment and nodded gently, okay. The two left the yard together. Wei Mengru hid her existence early and followed Musian silently. Stepping out of this ancient hall, what came into view were the mountains and ravines. There was white mist everywhere, and sometimes white cranes with fairy spirit flew over in the sky. That was the 8 treasure crane. As the name suggests, it was a crane with 8 kinds of rich nutrients. To put it bluntly, it was an edible treasure. But of course, no one in the Lianji sect dared to secretly take the 8 treasure crane. Because this 8 treasure crane is a treasure raised by the current head of Kanghai Peak to honor his master and occasionally to reward some outstanding disciples of the sect. If the crane raised by the head of the sect is discovered, you don't need to think about what the end will be. The peaks are connected by a special golden talisman, forming a suspended suspension bridge. At this moment, in front of the suspension bridge outside the hall, there are already many disciples of the sect who are watching the cliff and trying to find the spiritual dragon in the cliff. There are even some disciples who are ready to jump off the cliff to get an adventure and be appreciated by the senior spiritual dragon. Of course, being ready does not mean that they will really take action. After all, if they jump off this cliff, what if the senior spiritual dragon finds out that they did it for the adventure and does not send them back? Won't they die directly? No one wants to take such a risk. There are so many people, it will be even harder for me to contact Senior Linglong. Musian frowned secretly as he looked at the many disciples in front of the suspension bridge. I don't know why Senior Linglong suddenly roared like that last night. Originally, Musian wanted to wait until the disciples gradually forgot about this matter before contacting Linglong and asking about the powder luck. But now, so many disciples are staring at him, he doesn't want to be the target of public criticism. I have to think of a way. Musian was thinking about this, when he saw a young man in a black robe in the crowd. I recognized the other party's identity at first sight. It was the chosen son, Yayu. If it was Yayu, maybe he would be appreciated by Linglong. Musian couldn't help but think secretly. Although Yayu's usual performance was indeed stupid, it is undeniable that his luck was indeed very strong, and there was an old man helping him in his body. Maybe he could really get some immortal fate from Linglong. When Musian just thought of this, Yayu, who was not far away, seemed to have noticed someone's gaze and turned his head slightly to look over. He glanced at Muzian and confirmed that there was no girl behind this young Master Mu. He couldn't help but gloat a little, came in front of Muzian, and said with a smile. It seems that what happened yesterday was also difficult for young Master Mu. Eating from the bowl and looking at the pot, wanting Yeqian but not willing to give up Lingxian, and even Bairuoxi, Muzian deserves to be reduced to this state. Muzian was stunned for a moment, realizing the sarcasm in Yu's words, and sighed softly, it's really hard. It's not easy to appease Qian'er and Lingxian at the same time. He probably doesn't know that Lingxian is completely disappointed in him, Yu sneered secretly, but his face remained calm, saying, Mr. Mu should be more focused in the future, don't end up being deserted by everyone, even Miss Bai leaves you. A proud beauty like Bairuoxi will never allow the man around her to be a fickle guy. If she was told that Muzian went to find Yeqian last night, Yu's eyes flickered slightly, and a plan quietly formed in his mind. At this time, Yu noticed that Muzian's breath seemed to be a little disordered. He looked at Muzian for a few times and sneered, it seems that Master Mu didn't sleep well after returning home last night. That's right. If it were him, he would also have difficulty falling asleep if he encountered the same experience as yesterday. Muzian was not annoyed at all, but just smiled lightly, after all, I have to accompany Ruoxi to practice double cultivation at night. Yu's smile froze, his eyes slightly focused, staring at Muzian. Soon, his face returned to the indifferent smile of the past, and said, Master Mu, let's not talk about whether you and Miss Bai practiced double cultivation last night. Even if it is true, Bairuoxi now has nothing to do with me. Muzian nodded and smiled, you are right. He was not interested in sharing with others how smooth Bairuoxi was and how beautiful her figure was. It was also interesting to let Yu continue to satisfy himself with the illusion that he had won. Muzian retracted his gaze and turned to walk along the direction of the suspension bridge. He decided to go around today to see if he could find a place where there were no sect disciples nearby and try to communicate with Ling Long. Before leaving, Muzian suddenly remembered something, stopped, looked over, and smiled, by the way, Qian'er's rouge tastes pretty good. Yu just smiled faintly and didn't care. Muzian thought he had everything under control. If he hadn't gone to find Lingxian last night, maybe Muzian would have really won. After all, that simple cousin had been coaxed by Muzian's sweet words. But if Lingxian also knew about this, it would be completely different. Yu looked at Muzian's back as he left, sneered secretly, and was about to look away. At this time, he suddenly saw Muzian raised his hand and took out a jade bottle made of blue and white porcelain from the ring. On the surface of the jade bottle, he clearly saw a character engraved. That was, the family's jade bottle. 5th grade elixir, Bulingdon. How could he have the soul replenishing pill? The family didn't have any 5th grade pills, and even Yu didn't have any 5th grade pills, but Muzian took out a soul replenishing pill so easily and took it. Moreover, the jade bottle containing the soul replenishing pill clearly had the family's logo engraved on it. Obviously, Muzian got the pill from someone in the family. Qian'er couldn't have such a precious pill. But who else besides Qian'er could take out such a precious pill from the family? The answer is already very clear. The only girl who could easily take out such a rare pill and give it to someone else is Lingxian, who has a rather mysterious background. The originally indifferent smile on Yu's face froze slightly, and he stared at Muzian's back, shouting wildly in his heart. Lingxian actually gave him such a precious pill. How could it be possible? After she knew about Muzian's double-minded behavior last night, she would not have given him such a precious elixir. No. This elixir may not have been given last night, but Lingxian gave it to Muzian a long time ago, but Muzian only took it today. When Yu thought of this, he felt a little relieved. At this moment, the corner of his eye suddenly fell on the purple-skirted girl who was walking out of the hall. In the sun, Her face bloomed with a reserved and elegant sweet smile, and she walked towards here with her skirt flying. Almost at that moment, many disciples of the sect could not help but look over slightly. A beautiful woman like Ye Lingxian, who is quiet and elegant, is rare even in Lianji section. Even though everyone is very concerned about Linglong's time at this moment, they can't help but look at this girl's pretty face a few more times. Ye Yu raised his head and was about to speak. At this moment, Ye Lingxuan's eyes suddenly fell directly on Musian, and she called out in a clear and pleasant voice. "Brother Mu." After that, under Ye Yu's dull gaze, Ye Lingxian trotted to catch up with Musian. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 104. Realizing that the girl behind him was running up, Muji stopped and waited for her. It wasn't until Ye Lingxian came closer that she smiled and said, "Are you finally willing to call me Brother Mu?" Ye Lingxian raised her head and smiled, "Isn't that what you want me to call you?" "This is indeed true, but why do I feel that your brother Mu does not suit your character as a reserved and somewhat arrogant young lady?" Musian smiled and said, "That's right. But does it really matter? Your brother Ye Yu seemed to be glaring at me just now. It was so scary," Musian said worriedly. Ye Lingxian glanced at Musian sideways, looking at his tea-filled look. She couldn't help but cover her mouth and chuckle. Does Mr. Mu still care about other people's eyes? She knew that Musian was a person who put interests first and didn't care about other people's eyes or reputation. Otherwise, given Musian's past power in Tianqian City, it would not have been difficult for him to whitewash himself. After all, if the bad guy wants to clear his name, he can get praise from people as long as he puts down the butcher's knife. "By the way, where are Mr. Mu going?" Ye Lingxian asked with a smile. "Why are you calling me young master again? You already said you were going to call me brother. Why is this girl so disobedient?" Musian pondered for a moment and then said via voice, "How much news have you heard about Spirit Dragon? Is he going to attack the Spirit Dragon?" Ye Lingxuan's eyes moved slightly and he also transmitted the message. "Spirit Dragon is an ancient Jirui that existed when the sect was founded. If you get its favor, you can get great luck, but it rarely values someone. After all, outside rumors what Linglong values is good luck, but that's not the case. What Linglong really values is whether he is pleasing to the eye or not. So, does it think I'm handsome?" Musian was stunned. Ye Lingxian immediately rolled her eyes at Musian. Then, she reacted immediately, stared at Musian in shock, and said through a message, "So, Spirit Dragon really chose you?" Musian nodded slightly. "The Spirit Dragon appeared yesterday, and it transmitted messages to me at that time. But there were many people at that time, so I wanted to find a time to see it when no one was paying attention, but..." Musian shook his head slightly and sighed. Linglong's voice attracted more disciples' attention this morning. He had no choice but to find the Spirit Dragon as soon as possible. I hope it's a pretty girl." Ye Lingxian pondered for a moment and put forward his own suggestion, "You can go to the cliff near Lianji Peak and try calling the Spirit Dragon. Few disciples will pass by there. You can't enter Lianji Peak. There is a formation there," Musian said helplessly. "And if I accidentally meet Lan Mulian's master and let her realize that I am her pen pal, wouldn't it be very embarrassing? Musian is not yet ready to raise a great white shark in his fish pond. His fish pond is too small, not to mention the rank of the sect leader is too high. Even if it is really conquered, the other small fish will probably be eaten up." Unexpectedly, Ye Lingxian immediately said, "I have a way to take you into Lianji Peak. Are you willing to help me?" Musian looked at Ye Lingxuan's profile and couldn't help but ask. Ye Lingxian nodded reservedly. "After all, you have helped me and Qianer so much, I should give you something in return." As she said that, she glanced at the almost invisible and beautiful woman behind Musian, and continued, "Sister Wei, I can also take her into Lianji Peak, but not into the depths." Musian thought for a moment, and finally nodded seriously, looked at Ye Lingxian with a smile, and said, "Thank you. Sister Lingxian is so kind." Ye Lingxian raised her snow-white chin reservedly, pretending to be indifferent, and gave a concise "hm." She glanced at Musian and said, "Even if I don't help you, you will find a way on your own in the future." "That's true, but the way I think about it may be to pass the blame onto other people, such as Gongsun Chang, Ye Yu, or the third prince." Musian smiled and said nothing. "He has never been a good person. If others are bad, he will only be worse than them. Anyway, let's go to Lianji Peak first," Ye Lingxian said. She turned her head to look at Wei Mengru, who had always remained silent, and smiled politely. "Sister Wei, I need to trouble you again." Wei Mengru softly said raised her hand to seal the secret, and the flying sword floated in the air. Musian stepped on the flying sword skillfully, then stretched out his hand towards Ye Lingxian and said with a smile, "Let's go." Ye Lingxian stretched out her hand, and Musian grabbed her little hand and brought her behind him. He held her little hand tightly and said seriously, "Sister Lingxian, you have to hold on tight." Ye Lingxian secretly rolled her eyes at him. She knew clearly that this guy just wanted to take advantage, but it was difficult to expose him, so she had no choice but to let him make such little moves. Lianji Peak. Lan Mulian's embroidered little shoe stepped on the ground, and her skirt was flying, as graceful as a fairy. Next to her, a female pavilion master with a good figure, intellectual and charming clothes was sitting at the table, looking at Lan Mulian with a smile. Yan Ruyu looks like she is in her early 30s. She is no longer a young girl, but she is in the most plump period of a woman, as if she can squeeze out water with just a pinch. Her skin is white and firm, with a gentle smile at the corner of her mouth. There is intellectual beauty between her brows and eyes, and her eyes are sparkling. The years have not left any wrinkles on her face, but she has become a beautiful woman. Such mature charm is most able to attract the attention of young boys. This is no wonder. Although he has been a member of the sect for a long time, his age in the world of immortality is actually not important. For example, the age of the leader of the Lianji sect, one of the strongest in the Hedeo realm in the world, is so mysterious that few people know about it. Even many elders in the sect grew up under the supervision of the sect leader. Generally speaking, in the world of Xiangxia, age is just a number and does not mean anything. The two women complement each other brilliantly. Regardless of the sect leader, Yan Ruyu can be said to be the most capable among her peers in terms of appearance. Beauty is one thing, but more importantly, her temperament. It is the intellectual beauty that can only be exuded after reading poetry and books. In modern times, Yan Ruyu is probably a mature female teacher wearing a hip-covering OL uniform skirt, gold-rimmed glasses, and holding a ruler. Not to mention her peers, even if we look at the entire Liangyi sect, there are only a few who can compete with her. Senior Sister Yan came to Lianji Peak to see me today. Do you have anything to say? Lan Mulian smiled and said with a pleasant voice. Usually, Yan Ruyu rarely leaves the library because she prefers reading to socializing among the monks. Yan Ruyu smiled warmly and said in a gentle and pleasant voice, "If you have nothing to do, why don't you talk to junior sister Lan and have a chat?" Lan Mulian gently picked up the gauze, poured a cup of tea for Yan Ruyu, and said with a smile, "How could it be possible?" Senior sister Yan was joking. "It's just that Mulian was a little surprised that you would come out of the pavilion to chat with someone. If you don't mind, just sit in the pavilion and chat while we were chatting. Master just happened to have something to do and left." If Musian were present, his eyes would probably open wide when he saw senior sister Ian's appearance, making it difficult to look away. Even if you have seen Bairuoxi's good looks, you will still be shocked when you see Lan Mulian. A cold and weak Bairuoxi is enough to make people drunk. If a cold senior sister is added to the mix, it will be two completely different experiences. Yan Ruyu took a sip of tea and sat in front of the pavilion chatting with Lan Mulian. Yesterday, the spirit dragon appeared from the cliff. It seemed that it had taken a fancy to the disciples who passed the sex examination, but then left again for unknown reasons. It was really strange. Yan Ruyu mentioned what happened yesterday. Lan Mulian's eyes moved slightly, as if he was a little surprised. He turned his head and looked over and said, "Spirit dragon showed up yesterday. Is he really interested in a certain disciple?" She vaguely guessed it yesterday, but she was still a little surprised after hearing Yan Ruyu's words. Yan Ruyu crossed one of her legs and said with a smile, "You know that person too? I'm afraid she will have a seat in the quota of inner disciples this time." "By Ruoxi?" Lan Mulian asked. Yan Ruyu smiled and nodded. Linglong seemed to have taken a fancy to her at that time, but in the end, Linglong did not give her luck and went back the same way. When she said this, she paused and said, "Did the sect master leave this time to see the spirit dragon?" Lan Mulian shook his head slowly. "Master didn't explain where he went." Yan Ruyu nodded slightly. "That's true, after all, he was the sect leader, so he couldn't go out and explain it to his disciples. Actually, I came to see junior sister today because I want to ask you something." Yan Ruyu suddenly changed her voice, her tone became more serious, and she stared at Lan Mulian with a pair of beautiful red and phoenix eyes. "Senior sister, it's okay to say it," Lan Mulian said with a smile. Actually, many people at that time thought that the person Linglong was interested in was Bai Ruoxi, but I had a different opinion. Yan Ruyu calmly took a sip of tea, making her lips a little more moist, and looked sideways. Smiled and said, "Yesterday, the beautiful lady Bai Ruoxi was accompanied by a young monk." Lan Mulian's face was expressionless. She knew who Yan Ruyu was talking about, but she didn't want to accept the words. That frivolous guy didn't even know how to write a letter to Zhaihe after he went back. "I'm afraid he's still immersed in Bai Ruoxi's gentle country and can't extricate himself. That's the little monk that junior sister is interested in." Yan Ruyu spoke again. Knowing that she could not remain silent, Lan Mulian said, "Sister, do you suspect that the person Linglong was interested in at that time was not Bai Ruoxi, but Musian?" Not long ago, Musian understood some of the secrets of the formations in the Forest of Trials. He just led a group of disciples to pass the sect examination at Kanghai Peak. There should be some secret hidden in him. Yan Ruyu paused and continued, "Linglong was attracted to Musian because of this secret. I was wondering, is this possible?" Lan Mulian raised her eyebrows slightly and said calmly, "I don't know much about that person, so I may not be able to answer senior sister. Junior sister is serving as the sex assessor this time. She is responsible for Tianqian City, right? In the luck test at that time, how many outstanding assessment disciples were there?" Yan Ruyu did not give up and asked again. "Bai Ruoxi, Ye Yu, and Ye Lingxian are all very lucky people," Lan Mulian replied. "Where is Musian?" Yan Ruyu asked. Lan Mulian smiled and said, "Very ordinary luck." Yan Ruyu's pretty lips parted slightly, and she smiled again. "If Musian is extraordinary in any way, I won't be able to make an exception and accept him as an inner disciple." Lan Mulian glanced at the senior sister with some surprise. Generally speaking, the 9 peaks can only select 9 inner disciples in total, and those who join the sect through the back door, such as Musian and the third prince, still have to be outer disciples for a few years and then pass through the future. Only through the sect competition can you have a chance to be promoted to an inner disciple. But the library pavilion is a very special place. If Yan Ruyu wants to recruit an inner disciple, it will not be difficult. If it's for his own good, you should do it. But she really wasn't worried about senior sister Yan. Yan Ruyu has been stuck at the bottleneck of the 3rd level of returning to the void for so many years. If she knew that Musian was a natural furnace, she believed in Yan Ruyu's character, but faced the temptation to break through the bottleneck. She was not sure whether Yan Ruyu could resist this temptation. Looking at it like this, the junior monk and junior sister seemed to really value him. Yan Ruyu narrowed her eyes slightly and noticed some details through Lan Mulian's subtle movements. It is impossible for a proud woman like Lan Mulian to value an ordinary monk so highly. There may be some secrets hidden in Musian's body. Yan Ruyu made this judgment silently in her heart. At this time, she suddenly saw Lan Mulian slightly raising his head and looking towards a certain direction on Lianji Peak, with a somewhat surprised look on his face. "What's wrong, junior sister?" Yan Ruyu asked. "Someone broke through Lianji Peak's formation and came in," Lan Mulian said. Yan Ruyu narrowed her eyes slightly. Although she was surprised, she was not panicked. This is the Lianji sect, and this place is also the Lianji Peak. Even a fool knows the consequences of trespassing on the Liangyi summit. With the strength of that sect leader, even if an enemy breaks into this place, they will only be suppressed by raising their hands. "Who is he?" Yan Ruyu asked. "Musian." Lan Mulian paused, her thin and elastic alluring lips slightly opened, her eyes were as cold as a cold pool, and she said again, "And Ye Lingxian." "Oh," Yan Ruyu became a little more interested. "This is a bit interesting." With this aura of junior sister, when she mentioned Musian, even though she was well disguised, she was obviously unhappy. It's quite rare to annoy junior sister Lan, who usually behaves calmly. "What are they doing here at Lianji Peak?" Yan Ruyu whispered to herself, then raised her head and said, "Go and take a look." Lan Mulian was silent for a while. If she rejects Yan Ruyu now, this beautiful woman will definitely go there by herself later. This is what she doesn't want to see. Good. Finally, Lan Mulian nodded slightly and agreed. At the same time, Ye Lingxian led Musian into Lianji Peak. The formations from the outside world did not stop their progress at all, as if they were useless. "Sister Lingxian, how did you do it? Are you a genius in formations?" Musian couldn't help but be a little surprised. Even a genius can't break through the formation set up by that sect leader. Ye Lingxian shook his head slightly and inadvertently glanced at the ring on his finger. As if she didn't want to dwell on this topic, Ye Lingxian quickly changed the topic and said with a smile, "Between this, let's go to the top of the mountain and have a look first." It seemed that the ring on her finger had an effect. Musian still noticed Ye Lingxian's casual look, and couldn't help but sigh in his heart, "This is really a little rich woman." With a 5th grade elixir and a mysterious ring, the power behind Ye Lingxian is probably quite astonishing. Of course, Musian saw through it and did not ask further questions. Suddenly, a beautiful singing voice came to his ears, which made Musian subconsciously raise his head and look at the top of Lianji Peak. Ye Lingxian glanced at the boy beside him curiously. "What's wrong?" "I seem to hear the singing of the spiritual dragon," Musian suddenly said. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 105. The Song of the Spirit Dragon. Ye Lingxian repeated it, raised her head and followed Musian's gaze, looking up at the peak of Lianji Peak in the distance. She tilted her head slightly and wondered, "Why didn't I hear anything?" Wei Mengru glanced at Musian and whispered, "I didn't hear anything either." Musian held his breath and listened carefully. Only then did he realize that the song did not come from the peak, but directly from his mind. "This is sound transmission," Musian said. "Can sound transmission be transmitted from the peak to your brain?" The quiet and elegant Ye Lingxian frowned. Although she was a cultivator in the Qi training realm, she also knew that sound transmission between cultivators must be done in close proximity. And now Musian said that he heard the song of the spirit dragon here. It was really a bit strange. Musian thought for a moment and said, "Since Senior Linglong has existed since the founding of the sect, his vision and realm are beyond our imagination. Maybe he has some secret method to transmit sound through the air." Ye Lingxian thought about it and soon felt relieved. That's right. After all, after the Qi training realm, every promotion is a huge qualitative change. No one knows whether the other party has any secret method to transmit sound through the air. Let's go and take a look. Musian made a decision immediately and looked at Wei Mengru and said, "Sister Mengru, I will trouble you again." Wei Mengru nodded expressionlessly. Although she didn't seem to have any emotional fluctuations, there was actually a hint of curiosity in her eyes. The flying sword carried the three people into the air, flying from the foot of the mountain to the peak. Musian looked up and looked around in the wind. The song in his mind came again. The song was quite beautiful, but it gave people a feeling of sadness and loneliness, just like the song of a siren in the deep sea. Unconsciously, the three of them arrived at the top of Lianji Peak. Wei Mengru stepped on the flying sword with her small short boots, raised her hand and made a gesture, and the flying sword stopped at the top of the peak. Ya Lingxian, wearing a lavender double-breasted skirt, lifted the hem of her skirt and jumped down from the flying sword lightly, looking around the empty and lonely environment on the top of the peak, with a bit of nostalgia in her eyes. About 7 or 8 years ago, Ya Lingxuan's father brought her to Lianji sect once. She didn't expect that this time she came here as a disciple of Lianji sect. I wonder how the sect master is now? Ya Lingxian sighed quietly in her heart. Her childhood memories are basically blurred now, but she still vaguely remembers meeting the Empress when she came to Lianji Peak that year. Although her face has become blurred with the passage of time, until now, she still leaves a peerless back in Ya Lingxuan's mind. For a woman like that, time probably won't leave any traces on her face. Musian had just asked her how she had unlocked the formation of Lianji Peak and entered. Actually, there was no need to unlock it at all. Because this ring was the gift given to her by the sect master that year. If she was promoted to an inner disciple in the future, I wonder if I would have the chance to see her again. Ya Lingxian, who looked indifferent on the surface, had a little girl's expectation in her heart. At this moment, a beautiful song suddenly came from the depths of the cliff. Musian was refreshed and looked down at the cliff of Lianji Peak. Linglong really came to Lianji Peak. It was really the right decision to let Ya Lingxian follow this time. After all, this is Lianji Peak, and no disciples will pass by here. It is the most suitable place to meet Linglong here. Musian thought of this and waited for a while at the top of the peak. Not long after, a beautiful song came from the depths of the cliff again. For some reason, Musian suddenly had a strange feeling and whispered, "Is Senior Linglong calling us to go down and see him?" Although he couldn't hear what Linglong was saying, he had this intuition in his heart. The intuition of a cultivator is often very likely to happen. Wei Mengru pondered for a moment and said, "Let's go down and take a look." After that, she summoned the flying sword again and took the two of them to slowly float down from the top of the peak to the depths of the cliff. The flying sword passed through the clouds between the cliffs. After an unknown amount of time, the three of them landed at the deepest part of the cliff. Musian looked carefully and saw a rather ancient gate in front of him. And on the gate, there were words that did not belong to this era. The singing of Linglong came from that gate. "Is this a cave heaven?" Musian suddenly asked. It is said that those cultivators who have returned to the realm of emptiness can open up a piece of pure land with spiritual energy, which is called cave heaven. The so-called cave, as the name suggests, may look like a cave from the outside, but it is a different world inside. The house where Musian and others live is a cave created by a cultivator in the sect. Wei Mengru nodded gently and affirmed. "Should I go in and find it?" Musian fell into a brief contemplation. At this time, Ya Lingxian seemed to have sensed something, raised her eyes slightly, with a strange light in her eyes, and whispered, "There is something in this cave that is calling me." Musian was stunned, and subconsciously turned his head to look at the beautiful and refined girl. "There is something in the cave that is calling you. It seems that your golden finger has also arrived." "What about my golden finger?" Thinking about it, Musian made a decision after a brief contemplation, saying, "Since Senior Linglong called us here, let's go in and take a look. If there is something that really resonates with you, maybe you can get some immortal fate here." Ya Lingxian couldn't help but feel a little more apologetic when she heard this, and hesitated and said, "Sorry, I should have come to help, but it turned out that you helped me." Muzian shook his head and smiled, "Don't say such things, Lingxian." He quietly removed the title of sister and changed to calling her by her name, but Ya Lingxian didn't notice it at all. "For you, everything is worth it, Sister Lingxian." Muzian stared at her and spoke softly. Ya Lingxian subconsciously raised her eyes, looked at Muzian's handsome face, and the sunny smile on his face at this time, and finally said softly, leaving only a crisp and pleasant voice. "Thank you." Ya Lingxuan's originally frozen heart seemed to melt a lot again. The original precautions against Muzian had already been quietly dissolved in the gentleness of this big brother next door. Muzian looked at this scene, his eyebrows relaxed a little, and quietly opened the personal interface. Originally, the word supporting role had been gradually covered by the pink love frame, but now, two words seemed to appear faintly on the pink love frame. Although it was very blurry, it was certain that the words were not the word supporting role. But now, Muzian couldn't tell what it was. It seems that my initial judgment was correct. The more I weakened the status of the protagonist, the greater the benefits and even luck I could get, so it seems that Sister Lingxian is indeed one of the protagonists. I just don't know what the words on my pink love frame are. Muzian stared at it carefully for a long time, and after confirming that he really couldn't identify the words on it, he finally gave up thinking about these things temporarily. Anyway, if I continue to operate like this, I should know soon. And even if this didn't happen, Muzian would help Ya Lingxian. After all, Ya Lingxian is a smart and capable sister to him. Helping his sister is also a preparation for his future, isn't it? Muzian smiled, quietly took Ya Lingxuan's hand, ignored Wei Mengru's contemptuous eyes like looking at a bug, and slowly opened the door of the cave. Almost at the same time, many disciples found something unusual in the cliffs of the Nine Peaks. The singing of the spirit dragon did not come from Lianji Peak, but from all over the Nine Peaks. From the beginning, there were disciples of the sect who dared to go to the bottom of the cliff to find out, and in the depths of each cliff, they found a cave. The caves under the cliffs of the nine main peaks are connected. There is no doubt that this is definitely the cave of the spirit dragon, and the singing just now is it calling the disciples of the sect. At this time, many people in the crowd had their eyes lit up. Yayu was even more excited, staring at the depths of the cliff. Just now, the old man in his body told him that there was a cave in the middle of the cliff. And in that cave, there was a huge opportunity. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 106. As the door of the cave heaven was pushed open, what came into view was not the imagined cave house, but a rather spacious open space. At this time, many sect disciples had gathered in front of the open space. They were all whispering and communicating with each other. Muzian took Ya Lingxuan's hand and quietly stood at the back of the crowd, looking at the nearly 40 sect disciples. It seems that there are cave heavens of spirit dragons under the cliffs of the nine main peaks, and these cave heavens are connected to the same place Wei Mengru transmitted the voice. Muzian was thoughtful, looking at the sect disciples around him, and his eyes quickly fell on the ancient bronze iron door in front. This should be the real entrance to the spirit dragon cave heaven. But I didn't expect that the spirit dragon actually attracted so many disciples. It is really smart. It knows that I don't want to be the target of public criticism, so it used this method to attract other disciples to enter this cave heaven together. Muzian couldn't help but sigh at the cleverness of the spirit dragon. If only Muzian accepted the luck of the spirit dragon, then Muzian would inevitably be remembered by others. But if a group of people entered this cave, Muzian would not be the most conspicuous one. This spirit dragon seemed to invite dozens of sect disciples, but in fact, the drunkard's intention was not to invite wine. "Here comes Pavilion Master Yan." At this time, there was a sudden exclamation from the sect disciples, and the crowd all looked at it. Not far away, a woman in a gorgeous long dress was walking in the air from a distance with a smile. Although her face was extremely beautiful, the disciples did not dare to have any blasphemy, and they all saluted with fists. It was the pavilion master of the library, Yan Ruyu. There was another woman next to Yan Ruyu. She was wearing a veil and had a cold temperament. This pavilion master Yan was quite beautiful. Musian also clasped his fists in the crowd, secretly observing the pavilion master of the library next to senior sister Lan. Among the women Musian knew, there were also such women. Different from the women Musian had known before, Yan Ruyu's temperament seemed to be more intellectual because she was well-read. The dress perfectly outlined her sexy and plump curves, revealing the seductive charm of peaches. However, Musian was a dedicated person. His eyes only stayed on Yan Ruyu for less than a few seconds, and then returned to the noble and cold senior sister Lan. This woman is indeed something. Not only is she strong, but she is also very smart. In addition, her temperament is cold and her figure is also very attractive. Musian looked up at Lan Murian, staring at Lan Murian with respectful eyes. So far, Lan Murian has left Musian with the impression of unfathomable. Not only because of her strength, but also because of her personality, background, and other comprehensive factors. He glanced at the collar supported by her full chest and exclaimed in his heart. Sure enough, this senior sister is not only unfathomable, but also her heart is also unfathomable. Lan Murian noticed that someone in the crowd was staring at her, and she frowned slightly, looking in the direction of that gaze. After noticing that it was Musian's gaze, her eyes stayed on Musian for a moment, then retracted her gaze, with no expression on her beautiful face. Senior Linglong hasn't opened the Cave Heaven Palace for a long time. This time, I think he is in a good mood. You must remember not to fight after entering the Cave Heaven. It is best if you have a chance to become an immortal, but don't force it if you don't. If you disturb Senior Linglong's quiet cultivation, you will be directly expelled from the Cave Heaven. Lan Murian's cold and pleasant voice came from the front of the Cave Heaven, and all the disciples clasped their fists in response, with a bit of urgency in their eyes to enter the Cave Heaven Palace. Senior sister, are there any other issues that need to be paid attention to when entering the Cave Heaven? Lan Murian had just retracted her gaze when she suddenly heard Musian's voice in her ear. She glanced at Musian and said, everything depends on fate. Senior sister is not particular about trivial matters. Although she is angry with me, she will not be angry about such an important matter. In other words, whether you can gain immortal fate in Linglong's Cave Heaven mansion depends on fate. Musian knows it in his heart. Strange, why can't I enter this Cave Heaven? A doubtful voice of a sect disciple suddenly came from the crowd. He looked at the sect disciples who entered the Cave Heaven mansion one after another, and looked at himself who was always isolated outside, with unwillingness in his eyes. To enter Linglong Cave Heaven Manor, you must at least have a rich and noble fate. Yan Ruyu smiled and said in a gentle voice, if you have ordinary luck, you will not gain anything even if you enter the Cave Heaven mansion. Hearing this, many sect disciples were a little regretful, with a look of loss in their eyes. Wealthy fate, to put it bluntly, is red luck. To enter the Cave Heaven mansion, you must at least have a rich and noble fate, or have the Emperor's purple chi and great luck to enter. Luck and talent are two different concepts. Some people have strong talent, but their luck is worse than others. Some people have both strong talent and luck, and they are generally called the chosen ones. This Linglong's Dongtian mansion has selected a large number of people from the beginning. Senior sister, I will enter the Dongtian mansion first, and I will come to find you tomorrow. Musian sent a voice message to Lan Murian. Lan Murian looked at Musian with her beautiful eyes and sent a voice message in a calm tone, I have free time in the next 2 days, but I will start to meditate in seclusion tomorrow, so Master Mu should not disturb me. There was an indifference towards Muzian in that cold and pleasant voice. If you were an ordinary person, you might have thought of quitting just by hearing such a repulsive indifference. But Muzian was obviously in a good mood and was not discouraged. He sent a message again: I wanted to go to Senior Sister in the past 2 days, but there is a formation in Lianji Peak. The paper crane message will not be isolated from the formation. Lan Mulian responded coldly, looking at the disciples of the sect who entered the heavenly mansion of the Spirit Dragon Cave one after another. Every disciple has a bit of expectation on their face, as if they are all dreaming about getting a good fortune from this cave. They obviously didn't expect that Senior Sister Lan, who was unattainable in people's eyes, was having a one-on-one private chat with a young monk. What the Senior Sister just said was blaming me for being too perfunctory before. If you want to contact her, there are many ways. This shows that she is waiting for an explanation from me, or giving me a chance. Mu Jian understood clearly and sincerely apologized. After that day, I wrote 3 paper cranes to send to Senior Sister, but in the end I still don't have the courage to send it to my Senior Sister. Lan Mulian ignored it at all. Senior Sister, why don't you meditate and practice again the day after tomorrow? Muzian tried to communicate again, but still received no response from Lan Mulian. She did not reject my message, which means there is still a chance. Muzian pondered for a moment and then transmitted the message again. Senior Sister, the singing voice of the spiritual dragon not long ago was calling me. Lan Mulian's eyes quietly fell on Muzian, with no expression on his face. He just said through the voice, were you the one chosen by Ling long before? Senior Sister is indeed very concerned about this matter. Muzian sent a message, it's a long story. If Senior Sister is free tomorrow, I'll go find you for a cup of tea. How about it? Lan Mulian was silent for a moment and sighed, you are a very smart child, but it's a pity that you spend all your time on crooked things. I understand, liking other people is a crooked way, and only favoring a cold sister like Senior Sister is the right way. Muzian said sincerely, I will work hard to correct my evil ways in the future. Take refuge in Senior Sister's great heart as soon as possible. Write a paper crane to Lianji Peak before coming tomorrow, and I will take you to the back mountain. The cold Senior Sister's tone softened slightly, and she no longer had the indifference that was enough to cause frostbite at the beginning. In addition, even if the person summoned by the spirit dragon is you, remember not to have any evil thoughts about it. It can sense the malice of others very keenly. Lan Mulian warned again, obviously still concerned about Muzian's character. There is something to it. Senior Sister is so kind to me. Muzian's voice was full of sincerity and gratitude. If Senior Sister is in trouble in the future, I will do my best to help her. Muzian had actually said these words to Lan Mulian once before, but she wouldn't mind if he said nice things a few more times. Especially for a woman with high emotional intelligence and high IQ like Lan Mulian, she should be able to hear how sincere he was in what he just said. Lan Mulian smiled brightly, which made the sun dim a bit. Go ahead, Senior Sister Yan and I will stay outside the cave for an hour before leaving. Muzian respectfully responded yes, and then stepped into the cave together with Ya Lingxian and Wei Mengru. Lan Mulian's eyes narrowed slightly, staring at Wei Mengru's slender back with a hint of doubt in his eyes. Why can she also step into Dongtian Mansion? At this time, Yan Ruyu turned her head to look at the woman beside her, and suddenly smiled. Junior Sister, were you communicating with that little monk just now? It seems that you really think highly of that little monk. Lan Mulian came back to his senses, maintained his usual indifferent smile, and said, he had several outstanding performances in Tianqian City before, so I paid a little attention to him. Yan Ruyu stared at Lan Mulian's graceful figure and smiled softly, that's it? Although his tone seemed calm and normal, when he looked up at Muzian, his eyes were full of meaning. That said, but from this junior sister's point of view, it was almost impossible to attract her attention just by excellent performance. After all, when it comes to geniuses, there are too many in this world. Those who can enter this spiritual dragon cave are all people with excellent luck. What's more, in terms of talent and luck, Ye Lingxian, Ye Yu, Bai Ruoxi and others, even if they are not better than Musian, they are not worse than him, right? Why doesn't Lan Mulian care so much about other people? Obviously, Musian still has some secrets. But then again, what kind of luck does Musian have? If the person who attracted the spirit dragon that day was not Bai Ruoxi, but Musian, what kind of luck can attract the attention of the spirit dragon? Yan Ruyu's beautiful red phoenix eyes narrowed slightly, with a hint of depth in her red pupils. At this time, on the other side, after Musian and others stepped into the Dongtian mansion, the ancient bronze door also closed. Musian took Ye Lingxuan's little hand and said with concern, "Be careful. Although Senior Linglong is not hostile, there is no guarantee that he will not encounter any danger. It is better for us to walk together." Ye Lingxian glanced at Musian, but surprisingly did not ask him to let go. After all, what Musian said does make some sense. Sister Mengru. Musian extended his hand to Wei Mengru again. Wei Mengru glanced at him sideways and said calmly, "No, holding hands now will affect my actions. If there is an accident, I may not be able to save you in time." Musian was moved and said, "Sister Mengru is so gentle. If it were in the past, you would have directly said that I was too weak and was a sluggish person." Wei Mengru nodded slightly, "If I have to say it, you are indeed a drag. I can't help it. After all, I have wasted a lot of time in the past, so I can only take my time. Besides, with Sister Mengru here, I feel at ease," Musian said with a smile. Ye Lingxian glanced at the young man beside her strangely, and couldn't help but said softly, "Brother Mu has a really good attitude." When she saw this scene, she thought for no reason that when she was at Ye's house in the past, Ye Yu's mentality exploded because he was teased for being too low level. He was also disliked by others, but in the end, Musian acted like a normal person, even mocking himself, not to mention anything else. This kind of mentality is really admirable. After all, Sister Mengru is telling the truth. Musian smiled, "There is no need to rush into practice. You can't be in a hurry when you practice, but I see that you are also anxiously practicing every night," Wei Mengru said with ridicule in her tone and looked at him sideways. "He works hard for Bai Ruoxi's cultivation every night." Musian turned a blind eye, coughed slightly, and changed the subject in an understatement, "It's really strange. If we go by what Pavilion Master Yan said, Sister Mengru shouldn't be able to enter Senior Linglong's cave." While holding Ye Lingxuan's little hand, Musian looked around and continued, "Moreover, we only entered a little later than the other disciples, but now we can't see anyone." When Wei Mengru heard this, she also looked around, raised her eyebrows inadvertently, and said softly, "It's indeed a bit strange, I can't feel the aura of a sect disciple around here." Logically speaking, they entered the cave heaven mansion less than half a stick of incense later than the others, but now there is no one left. Could it be that the cave is divided into several starting points, and after we entered the cave, we were assigned to one of the starting points? Ye Lingxian guessed. In the past, she had seen related descriptions in some books. Some monks would connect the caves and heavens they created, but when stepping into the caves and heavens, several different roads would separate, each of which might lead to different places. Only by passing relevant tests can one be recognized by the master of the cave. At this moment, a sad and beautiful song faintly came to my ears. Although he didn't understand the meaning of the song, Musian seemed to understand what Linglong meant. He raised his head and looked at the door in front of him that had become illuminated at some point, as well as the singing coming from inside that door. "You can be sure that the spirit dragon is inside that door." It looked like they skipped the testing process and reached the finish line directly. Muzian stared at the door with curiosity about the unknown in his eyes. Let me see if Ling Long is a young lady. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 107. Muzian walked into the bright exit in front, and what came into view was a blue sea. In front of the sea, a woman with a curvy figure was standing barefoot on the sea. Her body curves are graceful and charming, and her skin is white and translucent. Her silver hair falls naturally to her perky buttocks, and her back has a graceful and charming curve. This aura is absolutely unmistakable. She is the spirit dragon. Muzian looked at each other. He took 2 steps forward, clasped his fists respectfully and said, "Senior Ling Long." When the voice fell, there was no response. Muzian was about to speak again, when Ling Long looked over slightly as if feeling something. A pair of magnificent red eyes looked at the 3 of them, with confusion in their eyes. "What are you confused about? Didn't you ask us to come here?" Having said that, "This is too big, I guess it's bigger than Ruoxi," Muzian forced himself to control his eyes and not to look around. He said respectfully, "Senior Spirit Dragon, was it me you were calling before?" The seemingly cute silver-haired woman tilted her head slightly, blinked, and after looking at Muzian several times, there was a hint of tenderness in her eyebrows, and she nodded lightly, "A. She doesn't seem to be able to speak human language?" Muzian realized this and asked tentatively, "Did you come to me for something before?" Ling Long didn't speak, just looked at Muzian, and then glanced at Ya Lingxian and Wei Mengru. She pointed at her feet, as if signaling something. "Why, the feet are very white, but I don't have a foot fetish either." Muzian followed her gesture and looked down at her tender white feet, silently complaining in his heart. "Senior Ling Long means to let us get closer to her, right?" Ya Lingxian said suddenly. Spirit Dragon nodded his head. Since he had already come, Muzian could not back down now, so he and the 2 of them walked to Ling Long's side and looked at the silver-haired woman who was looking at him tenderly. "Is there something wrong with my XP? I think she is so beautiful." Muzian coughed and said, "Senior Ling Long, what do you want us to do now?" Ling Long glanced at the 2 of them, opened his mouth slightly, and suddenly said softly, "Let's go." This time, it wasn't that kind of singing, but human speech. And almost at that moment, Muzian realized that everything around him seemed to have changed rapidly, from the original beach to a place filled with the scent of medicine. As he said, Muzian's eyes moved slightly, and he looked at the silver-haired woman next to him in surprise, with awe in his heart. "It seems that it's not that she doesn't speak, but that everything she says will become true." Regarding words are followed by Dharma, Muzian has indeed seen similar introductions in the books he has read in the past, but they are very few. There is a very special physique in this world. Everything they say will become true. It sounds beautiful, but words are followed, which means that every word will affect cause and effect. For example, if Ling Long said Muzian was promoted to the realm of refining gods at this time, this would involve a huge cause and effect. Not only the person who spoke, but also the beneficiaries would also have certain problems. No wonder she always screams AAA. "I thought she couldn't speak human words, but it turns out she can't." Muzian felt slightly relieved. Muzian looked around at the surrounding environment. It didn't seem like he was in the cave just now, but in front of a quiet pavilion. On the table in the pavilion, there were several teacups. Muzian discovered that 2 of the teacups seemed to have been touched. Could it be that someone came to see Senior Spirit Dragon before us? Muzian guessed in his heart. After thinking about it, Muzian did not ask, but looked at her respectfully and asked, "Senior Ling Long, what should I call you?" At this time, the tea in front of the table formed 2 words. Muzian took a closer look and saw a name written on it, Lin Ling. She raised her bare hand and poured a cup of tea for several people. Ya Lingxian thanked him politely, but actually he was a little absent-minded. Because from the beginning, she felt like there was something nearby calling her. But since the spiritual dragon was right in front of her now, she had no choice but to suppress her inner impulse. Even if there may be some kind of inheritance here that fits her perfectly, she must not lose her composure in front of the spirit dragon. Just when she thought of this, Ye Lingxian suddenly felt a warm palm gently hold her little hand from under the table. Ye Lingxian stiffened slightly and subconsciously looked up at Musian. Musian was looking at her with a smile. Although he didn't speak, his eyes conveyed a meaning, "Don't worry, leave it to me." For some reason, Ye Lingxian guessed what he wanted to express just by seeing his eyes. Musian quickly withdrew his gaze and looked respectfully at the silver-haired woman who seemed a little silly, saying, "Senior Lin Ling, did you come to see me that day for something? If you need help, I will definitely help you. Go all out. Even if there really is some inheritance here that matches Ye Lingxian, we can't rush now, we must at least understand the purpose of this senior first." "First, don't be in a hurry." A text appeared in front of the table. Before Musian could speak, Lin Ling raised her head and looked in a certain direction outside the pavilion. Musian looked over and found that the pavilion they were in seemed to be suspended in the air, and outside the pavilion was an ancient palace. Through the windows of the palace, Musian saw several familiar figures. In addition to the third prince, there were 3 old friends from Tianqian City. Did she mean that I should wait until the test was over before talking about these things? Musian understood slightly in his heart, and his hand hidden under the table quietly clenched Ye Lingxian's small hand. Well, anyway, he was not in a hurry. Let's enjoy this good show first. The Linglong Cave Heaven had been opened to the disciples of the sect several times in the past, and each time 2 or 3 disciples benefited from it and obtained the inheritance of the overwhelming luck. No one knew why Linglong allowed the disciples of the sect to enter this cave heaven this time. But no matter what, no one would let go of such a fairy fate. At this moment, Ye Yu, wearing a black robe, followed everyone to an empty hall. There were 2 puppet mechanisms on both sides of the hall. As everyone stepped into it, they were activated and jumped out from both sides to stop everyone. These 2 dragon puppets looked like 4-legged snakes, with one eye bigger than the other, like a crooked melon or a jujube, which was enough to imagine how casual the owner who made it was. But the strength of these 2 crooked melons and cracked dates was extremely powerful, and it was difficult to capture them no matter how the monks on both sides besieged them. "Master Ye, is it really okay if we don't help?" At this time, a soft and pleasant voice came from the side. Ye Yu turned his head and glanced at the gentle girl next to him. He had suffered too much at the hands of Musian in the past, so Ye Yu almost forgot that he was a disciple of the sect who was among the geniuses. It was natural that there would be a few girls admiring him. "Don't worry, let them try first, we can just wait and act later." Ye Yu stayed on her attractive face for a moment, then showed a gentle smile. "Wouldn't it be stupid to consume these dragon puppets now? How can we win the luck inheritance left by the spirit dragon in the cave heaven if the spiritual energy is consumed too much later?" When Ye Yu thought of this, he secretly observed the disciples of the sect present, and suddenly realized that a sharp gaze was staring at him. He raised his head and saw a young man in a luxurious robe. The third prince, Ning Long. Although he did not pass the sect assessment of Kanghai Peak, the third prince, who already had a recommended quota, gave up the sect assessment after that and successfully entered the Lianji sect. This time, he was able to enter the cave heaven of the spirit dragon because his luck was the royal purple chi of the Dogon dynasty. The 2 looked at each other and then tacitly withdrew their gazes. "Senior Sister Lan just said that we can't have a conflict here, otherwise it might cause dissatisfaction with Linglong. There are some personal grudges between them, but compared with the luck inheritance left by Linglong, these grudges are nothing. What's more, the conflict between them was caused by the Ye sisters. And now, Ye Qian and Ye Lingxian, both failed to escape the clutches of Musian. In other words, they have a common enemy. The enemy of the enemy is a friend. Even if they can't be friends, at least there is no need to have a conflict again to avoid mutual loss. Yeah, you looked around, looking for Musian. He remembered that Musian was among the disciples of the sect just now, but now he couldn't find him. Could it be that he gave up halfway? It shouldn't be possible. With Musian's personality, how could he give up before the Linglong experiment started? What's more, he was still with Lingxian by his side. But if that's the case, why can't he find anyone? Yeah, you narrowed his eyes slightly, his eyes full of doubts. At this moment, an old voice suddenly came from his heart. They are outside the palace. Yeah, you turned his head and looked to the side almost at that moment. Outside a window in front of the hall, there was a pavilion. In front of the pavilion, Musian was sitting there, holding a cup of tea in his hand, talking and laughing with Ya Lingxian, and talking to another silver-haired woman he had never seen before. Ya Yu was stunned for a moment. Why are they outside? Aren't they forbidden to leave before passing the test left by Linglong? Ya Yu shouted in his heart, staring at Musian, and the scene where Musian spoke from time to time, causing Ya Lingxian to cover her mouth and chuckle. At this moment, the gentle smile he maintained was completely frozen on his face, and only confusion and anger remained in his heart. Everyone is taking the test here, why can he leave early? The third prince seemed to have noticed something unusual, and also turned his head to look, staring at Musian. The hateful dandy boy obviously found that two people were staring at him, so he took a sip of tea without making a sound, and then quietly placed his palm on Ya Lingxuan's slender hand, and then smiled and waved at them. Why is he there? Ya Yu stared at Musian, who was sitting in front of the pavilion, with surprise and anger in his eyes. The third prince also found it hard to accept. He had been pampered since childhood and could get the qualification to jump the queue no matter what he did, so it was naturally difficult for him to accept the other party's cheating behavior. He suddenly looked up at the empty hall and said angrily, "Senior Linglong, is this a little unfair to us?" When he said this, the third prince looked at the pavilion in the distance, and Musian, who was leisurely drinking tea. "We are taking the test here, but someone has already sneaked through your test. How can people feel psychologically balanced?" Almost at that moment, many people looked at them in unison. When they saw the people in the pavilion, many disciples of the sect had a little more resentment in their eyes. They fought hard here, but someone was already sitting outside chatting with a beauty while drinking tea. It was very irritating no matter how you think about it. Under the pavilion, Lin Ling stared at the third prince in the hall, and then glanced at Musian's dim eyes, and gently put down the tea in his hand. The two puppets that were originally moving suddenly stopped. The time in the hall seemed to stop, and Lin Ling's lips opened slightly, as if she said something. The next moment, the figure of the third prince disappeared in the hall. Everyone was shocked. The third prince was eliminated in advance. The anger just now seemed to be poured with cold water in an instant, and everyone seemed to be in an ice cellar. Think about it carefully, was he crazy just now? He actually questioned Linglong's decision? Isn't this looking for death? Musian appeared there, maybe just because he found a special pass condition or something like that. After all, she is Linglong, even the elders and the head of the sect have to respectfully call her senior when they see her. How could such an existence favor a small cultivator? At this time, the two crooked dragon puppets suddenly moved again. However, one of the dragon puppets actually rushed directly towards Ya Yu regardless of anything, forcing Ya Yu, who originally planned to paddling to fish, to raise his hand to resist. He turned his head suddenly and looked out the window, with a bit of coldness and dissatisfaction in his eyes. If Ya Yu was tough enough, he should have given up the test and left at this moment. But the luck inheritance left by Linglong, no one would be willing to leave like this. Even Ya Yu is the same. Looking at the chaotic hall at that time, Musian couldn't help but feel a little worried. He looked up at Lin Ling's exquisite profile and said, "Senior Lin Ling, will this be bad?" "No. Lin Ling shook her head gently, and the words on the table appeared, "Here, I have the final say." Muzian heard this, still with some worry in his eyes, holding the tea and slightly lowering his eyelids. These sect disciples who entered the Linglong Cave heavenly mansion were all looking at the inheritance of luck. However, they didn't seem to find that the real treasure was not the inheritance of luck. Muzian cared about the inheritance of luck, but not particularly. After all, the real treasure is not the inheritance of luck. Muzian gently put down the teacup in his hand. It's about time to test her depth. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 108. The spirit dragon, as an auspicious beast that existed in ancient times, its existence itself is a sign of good fortune. In the world of immortals, luck is a particularly important thing. To reach the pinnacle in this world, one must have talent and luck. However, the spirit dragon can give some people the inheritance of luck. This is a temptation that is hard to refuse. However, Muzian is actually not very interested in the inheritance of luck. In this cave, the inheritance of luck is indeed a treasure, but now there is a bigger treasure here. Muzian secretly observed this person who was suspected to be from the same period as the leader of the Lianji sect. At this time, the silver-haired beauty held the teacup in both hands, staring calmly at the front not far away. Her pair of gorgeous red eyes were clear and transparent, without any impurities, giving people a cute feeling. Muzian glanced from top to bottom inadvertently. It is indeed very big and white, probably a little bigger than Biruoxi. At this time, Lin Ling seemed to have sensed something, and slightly turned her head to look at Muzian, and tilted her head slightly, AAA. Muzian also tilted his head, AAA. She raised her finger lightly and wrote on the table, "You just stared at me, want to do something bad?" Muzian was stunned for a moment, and immediately shook his head and said, "Sorry, this is based on the most basic physiological instinct towards the opposite sex, I will try my best to restrain it." What senior sister Lan said was indeed right, Linglong can keenly feel the malice of others. Not only malice, but also some special thoughts, she seems to be able to detect. Fortunately, Lin Ling's temper is obviously quite good, just smiled slightly, and did not directly drive Muzian out like she did to the third prince. For those she likes, she is still very tolerant. Muzian took a sip of tea and looked at the two puppet dragons in the hall. These two puppet dragons were made quite casually, with one eye bigger and one smaller, just like 0.0. Although their shapes are a bit weird, they are extremely powerful. At this moment, they flapped their wings and pounced on everyone. The cultivators present were all in the Qi training realm. Facing such a puppet dragon, it was completely difficult to resist. Yayu showed superb fighting power and managed to resist one of the puppet dragons with different eyes. Yayu usually looks quite simple, but his strength is not bad. Muzian's eyes swept over Yayu leisurely and fell on the girl who was looking at Yayu in the corner of the hall. Well, the girl next to him is pretty. Muzian looked at the female cultivator who had just followed Yayu. Although her appearance was only above average, her figure was quite good. After scanning from top to bottom, Muzian casually retracted his gaze and looked at the silver-haired girl next to him. After sorting out his thoughts, Muzian said, "Senior Lin Ling, did you choose me before? Is it related to my luck?" Lin Ling held the teacup with both hands and took a sip, which made her lips more bright and moist. She raised her finger, and a paragraph of text appeared on the table. "Your luck is very sweet." This is the first time I heard that luck can be sweet or not. Muzian looked at the sect disciples who were fighting the puppet dragon and asked, "What does sweet luck mean?" "It's impossible that my luck is sweet because it is pink. Could it be that the tastes of those lucks are different? If you must say so, is the purple luck lavender?" Lin Ling gently put down the teacup in her hand, moved to the side, and got close to Muzian. A sweet fragrance covered the tea fragrance and floated into Musian's nose. Lin Ling turned her head to look at Musian, approached like a cat, stuck out her tongue, and licked Musian's face gently like a cat under Ye Lingxuan's surprised eyes. The itchy and moist touch made Musian stunned for a moment, and subconsciously turned his head to look at the girl next to him. Although I know that the other party may not care, or have no experience in human love, but when I really see such an intimate action, I can't help but be a little surprised. If Lin Ling licked Musian's face in the form of a spirit dragon at this moment, this scene would naturally not be too shocking. But the problem is, she is now in human form. And she is a queen with silver hair and red eyes. This lethality has skyrocketed by more than one level. The maid also looked at the scene in some surprise, her mouth slightly opened, and she wanted to speak several times, but she finally held back. While Musian was still wondering whether she had a crush on me, Lin Ling had already sat up straight again with a shy smile on her face. She raised her hand and took out a dark stone tablet and handed it to Musian. It was the test tablet that Lan Murian had used to test and assess her disciples before. Did she mean for me to test my luck now? Musian looked at the palm-sized test tablet and reached out to touch the surface of the test tablet. A pink light quietly lit up on the surface of the test tablet, but this time was different from usual. Musian soon noticed a wisp of purple air wrapped in this pink light. Royal purple air, Ye Lingxian almost blurted out, staring at the brilliance of the test tablet. If I remember correctly, I didn't see this wisp of purple air in the last test of Brother Mu. Ye Lingxuan's eyes flickered slightly, and she was a little confused. Musian also stared at the dragon-shaped purple air in the test monument. After a brief gaze, he whispered, "No. This is not the royal purple air." He always felt that this wisp of purple air had a very familiar feeling, but he couldn't remember where he had seen it before. "Senior, what is this?" Musian looked up at Lin Ling and asked. Lin Ling raised his finger and wrote 4 words on the table. Musian's eyes froze slightly on the 4 big words on the table. He was stunned for a moment, and then subconsciously looked up at this woman who looked a little cute. Heavenly Chi. Yes, what Lin Ling left in his body just now was a small fragment of heavenly Chi. No wonder he felt familiar with it. After all, Bai Ruoxi also had the Chi of heaven in his body, and he often assisted Bai Ruoxi in cultivation during this period, so he would naturally be familiar with the Chi of heaven. You just left a fragment of the Chi of heaven in my body. Musian looked up at Lin Ling with a bit of confusion in his eyes. Why? There is no such precious thing in the world that can be given away for free. Musian has always believed in this truth. Lin Ling raised her finger and wrote a paragraph on the table. There is too much Chi of heaven, and it needs to be distributed to others. Before Musian understood what she meant by this, Lin Ling opened her lips and whispered, "This place is 1,000 feet above the ground." The environment in front of them changed again. Just now they could still see the hall that was testing the disciples of the sect, but now they can only see clouds and mist. They are now suspended in the air. Although this ability is very inconvenient, it is also very convenient at the same time. Musian looked around and was a little envious for a while. At this time, Lin Ling raised her finger and gently touched the test monument she had made herself. Instantly, 3 strands of Chi of different colors lit up in the test monument. Musian's eyes were fixed on the light of the test monument. Lin Ling's body actually has 3 kinds of heavenly Chi. Miss Linglong is not a rich woman, she is simply the mother of a rich woman. Even Ye Lingxian, who has been accustomed to all kinds of big scenes with her father since she was a child, was slightly stunned. The Chi of heaven, the recipient will be blessed with luck, even if the cultivators in the entire fairy world may not be able to make up 6 or 7 parts, this Linglong has 3 different kinds of heavenly Chi. And the most surprising thing is that she can bear such a huge luck. At this time, Lin Ling continued to write on the table, "You can swallow up part of the luck of others." Musian's eyes moved slightly, and he thought to himself, "So, my luck is really related to the girl next to me? The more girls I know, or the more girls I pursue, the stronger my luck will be? Muzian had such doubts before, but it was just a simple suspicion at that time. It was not until now that he saw Lin Ling's answer that he dared to be sure. After all, in Muzian's own memory, when he was still a playboy, his luck was not particularly good. But since he met Bairuoxi, or in other words, since his relationship with Bairuoxi has developed rapidly, Muzian can clearly feel that his luck is much better than before. No wonder my luck is pink. It turns out that this luck is all from other girls. At this moment, Muzian suddenly realized. At the beginning, Muzian was just a villain in the newbie village, and a small supporting role in the early stage. Such a supporting role naturally has no good luck. His current pink luck is most likely obtained from Bairuoxi, even the Yes sisters, and his senior sister. Will swallowing up other people's luck affect them? Muzian asked. Lin Ling shook her head gently. Under normal circumstances, luck will overflow after it becomes strong to a certain extent, and will not continue to rise. A long-standing doubt in his heart was answered, and Muzian felt refreshed. Then, he asked a question that he was more concerned about: why did the senior find me? Our luck, exchange part of it. Lin Ling wrote this text on the table. The luck is too strong, it will be disturbed by the fire, so part of it needs to be transferred, she wrote again. The luck of the spirit dragon is too huge, so it has to use this method to transfer its own luck. Muzian thought to himself. Come to think of it, after all, one person monopolizes 3 parts of the heavenly energy, and normal people probably can't bear such a large luck. Senior wants to swallow up part of my luck and feed back part of his luck to me, Muzian asked. Lin Ling nodded, staring at Muzian with bright eyes, as if asking for his opinion, without any bossy airs. No matter how you look at it, this is a profitable business. The existence of the spirit dragon itself represents luck. Except for someone like Lin Ling, who would dislike having too much luck. Muzian put on the attitude of a junior and said respectfully, I am willing to contribute my own efforts to the senior. But then again, how can she swallow up my luck and feed it back to me? Is it to lick it like she did just now? Looking at Lin Ling's beautiful shy smile, Muzian couldn't help but think about this secretly. This woman doesn't even know how to hide her inner emotions. Whether she's happy or unhappy, it will show directly on her face. By the way, I would like to ask you, senior, when the girl next to me just stepped into the cave, she seemed to feel something calling her. I wonder what the reason is, Muzian suddenly asked. Lin Ling tilted her head slightly and said, AAA. Senior, you should write it by hand. Muzian smiled. A paragraph of text appeared on the table. Who is she to you? Ye Lingxian also saw the text on the table and looked up at Muzian inadvertently. Muzian stared into Ye Lingxuan's eyes and showed a gentle smile. Lingxian is my most important sister. Ye Lingxian frowned slightly, as if she was not satisfied with this answer, but did not say anything, but maintained her usual reserve and elegance. Lin Ling thought for a moment, turned her head to look at Ye Lingxian, and pointed at the words that just appeared on the table. Follow me. Ye Lingxian subconsciously looked up at Muzian, as if asking for his opinion. Muzian stared at Ye Lingxuan's pretty face and said softly, Lingxian, go with the senior, this is your immortal fate. Ye Lingxian bowed to the woman with gentle eyes and said, I will trouble you again. Lin Ling just nodded slightly and was about to get up and leave. At this time, Muzian suddenly asked, by the way, senior, what should these disciples who participated in the test do this time? 5 portions of luck inheritance, you just make the decision. A paragraph of text appeared on the table. Isn't she afraid that I will embezzle all 5 portions of luck inheritance? Muzian just thought of this, and saw Lin Ling blinking her cute red eyes at him, and he was relieved immediately. From the beginning, Senior Lin Ling did not open the cave to give the sect disciples the inheritance of luck, So naturally he would not care about such things. As Lin Ling took Ya Lingxian out of the court, Muzian soon discovered that an ancient parchment scroll had appeared on the table at some point. After opening the parchment scroll, a map appeared in his vision, and the 5 locations of luck inheritance in this cave were marked on it. Wei Mengru glanced at it, then looked at Muzian and said, "What are you going to do?" "Take 3 and give 2," Muzian said after thinking for a moment. He was not sure whether Linglong was testing his character. If he took all the luck inheritance for himself, it would not be good. But taking part of it was good. Wei Mengru stroked the teacup with her fingertips and whispered, "You might be hated by others." Muzian shook his head, looked at the misty sky, and smiled. If they knew from the beginning that there were 5 people who could inherit the fortune inheritance, and I suddenly told them that only 2 of you could get the fortune inheritance, they would be very unhappy and even hold a grudge against me. But if I spread the news in advance and let them know that only 1 person could get the fortune inheritance in this test, but Muzian pleaded with Miss Linglong and won 2 fortune inheritances for them. At this time, they will have no objection. No, it should be said. Muzian shook his head gently, turned his head to look at Wei Mengru's contemptuous eyes, and smiled gently. They will thank me. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 109. Boom. As the dragon puppet's powerful claws stomped on the ground, the whole hall seemed to shake. The shaking of the ground made it difficult for these cultivators in the Qi training realm to stabilize their bodies. In the crowd, Huang Manting, who was dressed in a black dress and had a charming figure, looked up at the dragon puppet that was dancing with 4 claws. It looked funny, but its strength was extremely terrifying. "Everyone, if you keep your reservations, I'm afraid no one can pass the test of Senior Linglong today." She looked up and looked around at everyone, and her soft and pleasant voice came from the hall. "Some of the disciples who can enter the Lianji sect may have poor brains, but most of them are very smart. They naturally know that if they consume too much spiritual energy here now, they may not be able to pass the subsequent tests. If they lose the opportunity to inherit the luck because of this kind of thing, I'm afraid they will regret it in the future. We can only go all out and repel these 2 dragon puppets first," a sect disciple in the crowd said loudly. "That's what I said, but if someone has reserved their strength, no one would know, right?" As soon as these words came out, everyone's eyes flickered slightly while struggling to resist the spiritual pressure released by the dragon puppet, and their minds were different for a while. The disciples of the sect who were able to enter the Linglong Cave Heavenly Palace were all geniuses from various places, and they were not weak in terms of strength and talent. But the problem is that they are only strong among their peers, but facing this dragon puppet that seems to be in the realm of refining spirits, especially when everyone has reservations and people's hearts are not united, it is naturally difficult to deal with it. Yu dodged the dragon puppet that was chasing him with great agility, and then raised his head suddenly, saying angrily, "After all, isn't it Muzian's fault? If it weren't for him, maybe we wouldn't have such a difficult test at all." In the crowd, Gongsun Cheng turned his head to look at Yu and said, "Master Ye, what do you mean? Didn't you see it at that time?" The silver-haired woman next to Muzian at that time was Senior Linglong, right? Maybe the reason why our test is so difficult now is because of his suggestion to Senior Linglong. Yu sneered, "Didn't you see it just now? When the 3rd prince denounced the unfairness of this test and even slandered Muzian, he was immediately driven out of the hall by Senior Linglong. Maybe he used some method to please Senior Linglong." After these words came out, no one in the hall said anything. Gongsun Cheng's words did make sense, but they were not so foolish as to be bewitched by a few words. Gongsun Cheng followed up and said, "Maybe we are just drawing water with a bamboo basket, and it is not impossible that the inheritance of luck has been taken away by Musian long ago. Master Gongsun, this is a bit unreasonable. Senior Linglong would not lower himself to play tricks on us juniors and not even leave a piece of inheritance of luck, right? Someone in the crowd couldn't stand it and couldn't help but chuckle and said. Senior Linglong would not do this, but there is no guarantee that Musian would not have found the place where the inheritance of luck is hidden in advance, and then left here in advance after getting the luck. Some people also agreed with Gongsun Cheng's words. I say, everyone, you haven't even passed the test yet and you are thinking about this kind of thing, isn't it a bit unreasonable? At this time, a soft voice suddenly came from the crowd, and many disciples turned their heads to look. It was Huang Manting, the eldest lady of the Morning Light Chamber of Commerce, who passed the sect assessment with excellent results this time. You are not stupid. If you give up because of 2 random words, you might as well quit the test now. While Huang Manting was speaking, she raised her bare hands, and the spiritual energy in her body quietly gathered in her palms, blocking her in front of her to resist the spiritual pressure from the puppet dragon. Miss Huang is right. What we need to do now is to concentrate on dealing with these 2 puppet dragons, rather than starting an internal conflict before passing the test. Beside her, a clear and sweet voice of a female cultivator came immediately. She stared at Huang Manting's exquisite profile, her eyes full of obsession. Yes, it's too early to think about this kind of thing before you even pass the test then, another cultivator agreed with Huang Manting's words, and his eyes also looked at her involuntarily. In just 2 or 3 days, Huang Manting had already had 4 or 5 followers around her, and 3 of them were even pretty female cultivators. If Musian was present, he might have applauded and admired. The means by which this enchantress captured people's hearts were truly astonishing. At this time, Yu suddenly said, "What if we pass the test and find that the inheritance of luck has long been taken away by Musian? What should we do then? Wouldn't we have accompanied Musian for nothing? Even if we really pass the test, how should we divide up the inheritance of luck if there is only one? After all, it's because Musian took away one of the inheritances of luck." Gongsun Cheng tried to stir up trouble in the crowd. "And maybe the inheritance of luck he took away is the only one in this cave." Huang Manting looked at Yu, and her eyes inadvertently glanced at Gongsun Cheng again, her eyebrows slightly frowned. These 2 people are eager for Musian to become the target of public criticism. However, these sect disciples are not stupid, and they just listen to such words. The sect disciples present are all smart people, and they will not be affected by these few words and become hostile to Musian. Of course, while they are not hostile, they also will not speak for Musian. After all, Musian was not related to them. Don't offend others, but you won't speak for others either. This is how most people behave. Huang Manting's eyes flashed slightly as she looked at the scene and did not continue to defend Musian. That guy Musian was indeed by Spirit Dragon's side just now, maybe he actually got the inheritance of luck. Not only the existence like Senior Sister Lan, but also the Spirit Dragon has hooked up. Musian may be much more powerful than I thought. Huang Manting looked up at the 2 puppet dragons flapping their wings in the air, but she couldn't help but think of such a thing. If it were her, she really didn't have the confidence to treat the spirit dragon with a normal heart when she saw it. After all, that is the spirit dragon, which is rumored to represent the existence of the word luck. Who wouldn't have a bad idea after seeing her and have the idea of getting her monstrous luck? And spirit dragons happen to be keenly aware of other people's malice. In other words, when most people see a spirit dragon, they will immediately be driven out of the cave by it. I don't know how Musian managed to get close to her and at the same time ensure that he had no ill intentions. This witch obviously doesn't know that there is a creature in the world called LSP. They care more about beauty than luck. Boom! A sound exploded in their ears, and everyone looked up suddenly, only to see 2 puppet dragons suddenly let out an astonishing roar. They twisted their bodies, exuding unparalleled aura. Judging from this aura, their true strength is probably far more than just refining gods. At least it's not the beginning level of god refining. However, the two puppet dragons did not launch an attack. Instead, they twisted their bodies and slowly returned to their original guard positions, as if they had been secretly ordered not to act. The crowd fell silent, and the sect disciples all looked at the scene with a bit of surprise in their eyes. What's going on? These two puppet dragons stopped attacking on their own. While all the sect disciples were still looking at the scene in surprise, a gentle voice suddenly came from the end of the empty hall. I've only been out for a while, why is it so busy? I thought I heard someone discussing my affairs just now. Everyone looked sideways and saw the young man walking slowly from the depths of the corridor. Wearing luxurious robes and a gentle smile, he scanned the sect disciples, finally came to them, and said with a smile. Sorry to keep you waiting for so long. Musian. Yeah, you stared at Musian's figure and said in a deep voice, what are you doing here? I just happened to meet Senior Spirit Dragon when I entered the cave. After a lot of effort, I finally got from her the two places where the inheritance of luck is hidden in this hall, Musian said with a smile. I'm here to take you to the inheritance location. Yeah, you asked, since you know the location of the inheritance of luck, why don't you go there yourself? The inheritance of luck does not mean that the first person to find it can hold it. It depends on whether the individual's luck matches it, Musian said calmly. If it doesn't fit, even Senior Spirit Dragon won't be able to force luck on you. These words are just your words, right? Gongsun Cheng questioned. Musian smiled lightly and said, if you don't believe it, you can ask the elders in the sect yourself to find out. However, I have one request for you to take you there. Musian looked around the crowd and said loudly, this is the information I got from Senior Linglong with great effort, so if I really find the location of the inheritance of luck, I hope to be the first to test it to see if you are qualified to have this luck. When everyone heard this, they all nodded. Young Master Mu has worked so hard for this matter, and this is what he should be doing. Even if you get a destiny inheritance, it's a matter of course. Those who were somewhat jealous of Musian just now looked at him with much friendlier eyes. At this time, Gongsun Cheng suddenly said, Master Mu, how do you prove that the place you took us to is correct? Musian smiled and said, if you don't believe me, get out. Since you have doubts, why don't you go find the place where the luck inheritance is hidden? Do I still have to spoil you? Looking at Gongsun Cheng's face that suddenly darkened, Musian turned a blind eye and just cupped his hands towards everyone and said with a smile, everyone, there are a lot of tests in this hall. The tests in many passages are extremely difficult, and after passing there will be no luck inheritance in it. If you believe me, then Mu will take you all to the place where the inheritance of luck is hidden. He paused and said with a smile, if you don't believe it, you can explore this hall on your own, but if some mechanism is triggered, don't blame me for not warning you. These words were quite sincere, and everyone nodded in recognition of Musian. Musian looked at the scene and nodded with a smile on his face. Everyone just spent a lot of time fighting the two puppet dragons. Please rest for a while before setting off. After finishing speaking, Musian found an open space and sat down on his own. Why did you go out of your way to take them to the location of the inheritance of luck? At this time, Wei Mengru's voice suddenly came from the shadows. She was in the refining spirit realm and could not enter this hall, but she ignored this rule because of the spirit dragon. Musian smiled and admired these cultivators, looking at each female cultivator, secretly comparing which one had a better figure. At the same time, he transmitted his voice, this is the truth. After all, only things that are obtained through hard work can make people believe. Moreover, the world of immortals also needs to pay attention to human relations and worldly affairs. The disciples who left the Lianji sect basically all achieved good results. Musian was not interested in making a bunch of enemies for himself. Others played the Lone Ranger, but he played the brother immortal. In fact, the disciples of the sects present knew that Gongsun Cheng and Yayu's words just now were fanning the flames, but they did not speak to defend Musian, because Musian had no relationship with them. But after today, regardless of whether these sect disciples got the luck inheritance, they would more or less remember this favor. If someone slanders Musian again in the future, even if these sect disciples do not help to defend him, at least they will not stand in the hostile camp. This is the way of the world. There is another benefit to taking these sect disciples to adventure together. For example, from the beginning, there were many female cultivators with good looks who kept looking at Musian. After all, Musian's appearance is indeed quite handsome. In addition, now these sect disciples have something to ask of him, which will make many people subconsciously have the idea of pleasing. Of course, there are so many people now, so no female cultivator came up to talk to him on purpose. But being embarrassed to come up and talk now does not mean that you will not talk to him on the way after departure, or even in the sect in the future. Of course, Musian is a loyal person. Even if some female cultivators pursue him in the future, he will not rashly agree. He is not such a casual person. Musian sat in front of the open space, admiring the high looks of these female disciples of the sect, and enjoying the contemptuous look from the maid next to him, as if looking at a bug. The maid obviously guessed Musian's other purpose, which is why she showed such a disdainful look. However, Musian didn't care about Wei Mengru's eyes. After all, the other party knew him inside and out and knew what kind of person his young master was. If it was facing other girls, Musian might still pretend and show a gentle attitude of a boy next door, but if it was facing Wei Mengru, there was no need for this. That would only appear hypocritical. Anyway, Wei Mengru knew everything, so why bother pretending? If I really win her in the future, I must find an opportunity to say to her, "Sister Mengru, please step on me." I should be able to enjoy a better contemptuous look. Musian felt Wei Mengru's eyes and couldn't help sighing in his heart. If Ya Lingxian really gets some inheritance from Senior Lin Ling and her strength improves significantly, aren't you afraid that you won't be able to suppress her in the future? Wei Mengru suddenly said in a voice transmission. Musian came back to his senses from his previous thoughts, turned his head to look at Wei Mengru, who was almost hidden in the shadows beside him, and smiled and said in a voice transmission, "Everyone's strength becomes stronger, which is only good for me, not bad, right? Not only Lingxian, but also Ruoxi and Qian'er. The stronger they are, the more secure they are for me. I won't talk about senior sister Lan, she is already very strong, that's why it's hard to capture her." Musian paused and continued, "It's a good opportunity to see if Senior Linglong's luck inheritance can reduce Sister Mengru's bad luck a little." Wei Mengru's lips curled up slightly, and she said lightly, "Forget it, it will only be a waste if I give it to someone like me. My bad luck, I'm afraid it can't be offset by just one piece of luck. If one piece doesn't work, then 3 pieces." Musian smiled, "As long as the luck is spent on Sister Mengru, it's worth it no matter how much it costs." Wei Mengru looked at Musian deeply and said nothing. Unknowingly, the time of an incense stick passed. Musian stopped chatting with the maid, stood up and looked around, and said with a smile, "Everyone, we can set off now." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 110. In the final analysis, the inheritance of luck can be regarded as a secret method. Under normal circumstances, a person's birth luck is already fixed. But the existence of a creature like the spirit dragon itself represents the word luck, and she naturally has a secret method that allows others to obtain the luck she left behind. This spiritual dragon holds 3 pieces of heavenly energy, so its luck is so strong that it overflows, and is even troubled by karma fire. It's no wonder that after a while, a piece of luck will be passed down to future generations. It's not that Linglong was thinking about the disciples of the sect, it was just that her luck was too strong, so she used this method to alleviate her strong luck. At this moment, Musian was walking on a certain road with a group of people. Master Mu, no matter whether we get the luck inheritance or not, we will remember your kindness today. A sect disciple in the crowd spoke sincerely. Yes, Master Mu could have gone to the place where luck is inherited by himself, but instead he came here specially for us. This kind of arrangement is really admirable. Maybe he had already received the inheritance of luck. Gongsun Cheng wanted to say this, but in the end he held it back, looking at the harmonious atmosphere. What he could guess, many others must have guessed as well. But in this case, no one cares, and no one will mention this kind of thing. Not to mention whether Musian received the luck inheritance. Even if he did, under such circumstances, it is commendable that Musian is still willing to come over and be this good guy. We are all smart people. They followed Gongsun Cheng and Yayu's words just now, just because of their psychological imbalance. When someone is being slandered, even smart people will choose to remain deaf and dumb. Master Ye, do we still want to follow them? At the end of the crowd, a female disciple with an average appearance and a coquettish voice raised her head slightly and looked at Yayu, who had an ugly face, and suddenly asked through a voice message. Yayu stared closely at Musian, who was surrounded by the crowd. He only followed at the end, but never spoke. Teacher, can you find out if there is a place where the inheritance of luck exists nearby? Yayu tried to ask the old man in his body for help. After a long time, an old voice came softly, this place restricts the normal performance of monks above the Qi training realm. If you force the exploration, it may be possible, but it may be immediately noticed by the spirit dragon and you will be directly disqualified from the assessment. Yayu heard this and stared at Musian, who was surrounded by people, with a bit of unwillingness in his eyes. Didn't he know the map of this hall by cheating? Why won't he lose the qualification for the assessment? The old man was silent for a moment and sighed. That map was given to him by the spirit dragon examiner, wasn't it? Yayu seemed to be silenced and remained speechless for a long time. Musian can jump like this now, isn't it because he got the map of this hall from Linglong and knew where the destiny inheritance is hidden here? I don't believe that Musian is the kind of good person who doesn't want to inherit spirit dragon's luck, but instead leads the way for everyone, Yayu Han said. He knew Musian too well. He was a person who put interests first and would not do such harmful and unprofitable things. But if so, why would he do this? He didn't take advantage of the opportunity to inherit his luck, but instead took everyone to inherit it. Is Musian really that good? Is it true that, as Musian said, because the luck inheritance is determined based on the degree of fit, the inheritance is decided, so he took everyone with him? Maybe not. And even if it really depends on fit to determine whether you can have the luck of a spiritual dragon, Musian would probably have the idea of, if I can't get it, no one else can get it. If it were him, he will do the same. If you can't get it yourself, how can others get that precious luck? When Yayu thought of this, another possibility suddenly came to mind, and his eyes were fixed on Musian's back. No. Musian might have already received the luck inheritance, so he is now taking everyone to the location of the luck inheritance. Yayu stared at Musian's back, and the sight of him talking to the female cultivators beside him, causing them to chuckle, and suddenly said, Master Mu, this is really strange. Why do I feel that your luck is different from before? This sudden sound also caused everyone to subconsciously stop and look back at Yayu. Musian stopped and turned to look at the young man in black robe behind him. Master Ye, do you have any unique insights? Musian said with a smile. I can't say I have any insights. I'm just a little curious about Master Mu's luck. It seems to be different from before. Did something happen? Yayu stared at Musian's eyes, trying to get him to bite the hook. Naturally, he couldn't see the changes in Musian's luck, but he could bluff people. If Musian really inherited the luck inheritance, then he would have at least a little panic on his face. For example, did you get the inheritance of luck from Senior Linglong before you came here? Yayu asked again. That's right, with Musian's character, how could he let go of the destiny inheritance and not inherit it, but instead take others with him? The only possibility is that he has already obtained the luck of the spirit dragon. Musian looked at Yayu in surprise and said, you have found out. Yayu was obviously stagnant, as if he did not expect Musian to admit such a thing so frankly. I got the luck inheritance, and then what? Musian continued to smile and asked, young master, do you have anything to say? The crowd looked at this scene, coldly, but no one spoke. Yayu was stunned for a long time, and it seemed difficult to understand why they were silent. Until he saw the smile on Musian's face, he reacted. No. It's not that they didn't move, but these people have been won over by Musian. From the time Musian came to this hall in person and asked to lead the way for them, it didn't matter whether Musian got the luck inheritance of Linglong. The important thing is that he can really lead everyone to find the luck inheritance point. That's enough. Yayu looked at the scene and the crowd that never said a word, his face was extremely gloomy. Finally, with a somewhat unwilling tone, he whispered, it's okay. To question Musian now is to go against everyone present, he is not stupid enough to do that. Next, the crowd came to a high platform unknowingly in a low whisper. On the high platform, there was a stone tablet engraved with ancient characters, and in the stone tablet, there was a wisp of purple air that seemed to be able to cause the sound of a dragon. The luck of the spirit dragon. It's really here. The luck left by Senior Linglong, if you can get it, you will definitely be able to rise to prominence in the future. The eyes of the crowd were fixed on the wisp of purple air on the high platform, and they were all eager to try. Musian also looked up at the platform, looked at the purple air for a few times, turned to the crowd, bowed and smiled, everyone, I will go up and try first. If it doesn't work, then you can draw lots to see if you can get the luck inheritance. How about that? Just listen to Master Mew. This is indeed fairer to us. After all, it was Musian who brought them here, so everyone naturally had no objection. Musian bowed again, and then in the eyes of those people, he slowly walked up to the platform and looked up at the stone tablet, or rather, the purple air stored in the stone tablet. It was not until this time that he saw the true appearance of this luck. This thing, isn't it the purple air left after the spirit dragon licked my face just now? Musian looked at the purple air in the stone tablet, his fingers subconsciously touched the cheek that had just been licked, and there was a hint of strangeness in his eyes. The purple air that the outside world desperately wants to get, he can get more from Miss Linglong later. And I don't know whether it is Linglong who gave him the power or what. Musian can clearly feel that the purple air sealed in the stone tablet at this moment seems to be able to act according to his thoughts. Senior Linling is too generous. Musian quickly restrained his expression, stretched out his palm, simply touched the stone tablet, and gave up. Linglong's luck inheritance is indeed precious, but he has already obtained 3 luck inheritances, and he can also exchange luck with Miss Linglong later. There is no need to compete with them for this fairy fate now. After all, after greedily obtaining so many fairy fates, it is time to stop. I don't know if this luck can only be given to the other party by licking. If so, I can give it to Ruoxi and Chiena respectively after returning, and then give one to Sister Mengru. After Musian walked down the platform, he asked everyone to go on stage one by one to try by drawing lots. Next, one after another, the monks came on stage in order, until Gongsun Cheng came on stage at the end. His palm touched the stone tablet, and he looked at the dark stone tablet with a bit of burning expectation in his eyes. At this time, the stone tablet suddenly lit up with a faint purple light, and then the purple air quietly flowed towards Gongsun Cheng. Success! Gongsun Cheng's eyes were more excited, and his eyes were fixed on the purple air that was as vivid as a dragon, which was slowly flowing in the stone tablet. Those people just now did not make this purple air react, but he succeeded. The crowd immediately caused a commotion, whispering to each other, looking at Gongsun Cheng's back with envy. Huang Manting narrowed her beautiful eyes and stared at Gongsun Cheng. This guy, actually inherited the luck of the spirit dragon? Yu's eyes were more unwilling and nervous. If Gongsun Cheng inherited the first luck, then there would only be another luck left. If that luck is also obtained by someone else first, then this trip would be in vain? No. Look, that wisp of purple air did not enter Gongsun Cheng's body. At this time, someone in the crowd noticed something unusual and pointed at the stone tablet on the platform. The wisp of purple air that was about to enter Gongsun Cheng's body now stayed in the stone tablet, constantly moving forward as if to leave the stone tablet, but stopped several times. Gongsun Cheng's face was pale, but he stared at the stone tablet, constantly injecting his spiritual energy into it, maintaining the state of activating the stone tablet. Come in quickly. What the hell is this thing doing? Gongsun Cheng shouted hard in his heart, staring at the wisp of purple air. However, no matter how he shouted in his heart, the purple air just jumped back and forth between advancing and not advancing. Finally, the spiritual energy could no longer be maintained. Gongsun Cheng staggered back, and fell to the ground with pale lips. Then the next moment, he disappeared in the hall. Gongsun Cheng was also eliminated. Everyone's face was relieved, but at the same time, there was a bit more solemnity. Gongsun Cheng was a cultivator of the 8th level of Qi training, but after fighting with the purple air for so long, he still failed. Is the luck of this spiritual dragon so difficult to obtain? The eldest lady of the Dawn Chamber of Commerce has gone up, someone suddenly spoke. The disciples of the sect looked up. The eldest lady of the Dawn Chamber of Commerce was wearing a black dress like gauze, and her snow-white skin was faintly visible under the hem of the skirt. The black embroidered shoe set off her feet to be particularly white and crystal clear, and the curve of her back was slender and charming. She walked up the stairs slowly to the platform. Her usual casual look was a little more solemn, and her palm was about to touch the stone tablet. At this moment, a voice suddenly came to her ear. Relax your body, gather the spiritual energy in the cauldron, and don't try to use the spiritual energy to pull it into your body. It was Musian's voice. Huang Manting's charming peach blossom eyes flashed a trace of surprise, but she restrained it well, and quietly stretched out her palm to touch the stone tablet. The purple air in the stone tablet was like a swimming dragon, and then, under the eyes of everyone, it quietly entered Huang Manting's palm in less than a few seconds. The first successor of luck appeared.